Chapter 654. Shi Mengwan was struggling with life and death. No matter what, she had to fight for a chance for herself. Even if he couldn't escape in the end, Zhang Haoze had completely lost his mind. He still wanted to do something to her. She also wanted an experience that was relatively more respectful to her. It wasn't that he didn't feel conflicted, but now he could only accept his fate. She was the one who brought him back. She was the one who gave him this chance. If she was destined to be unable to escape tonight, then she hoped that her first time would be in bed, not here, in a situation like this. Zhang Haoze was still kissing her neck, but when he heard her words, he paused. In the next second, she was easily picked up by him. He walked very quickly, as if he was in a hurry. She was tightly held in his arms, her body pressed against his chest. She looked up at him. His gaze was slightly different from before. There were a few more flickering flames inside. Her back touched the bed, followed by his rather heavy weight for her. She didn't close her eyes. Instead, she looked at Zhang Haoze's eagerness and domineering actions. Her heart trembled. Big brother. Zhang Haoze became even more eager to plunder the girl's body. The corner of her lips started to feel numb and painful from his kiss. She reached out her hand to support his face and looked at him attentively. This face overlapped with that of Big Brother when he was a teenager. They had the same eyebrows and the same eyes, but the person in front of him had lost the youthfulness of his youth and was now more stable and mature. However, there was one thing that didn't change. His eyes were always sharp, like a lone wolf on the grassland. This face, these eyebrows, these eyes. She had thought about it countless times in her dreams. This was her big brother. He was the big brother who had been with her for more than a year. Shi Mengwan's eyes were burning. Big brother, please be gentle. At this moment, she didn't want to care about Zhang Haoze's identity. She didn't want to care about the woman beside him. She didn't want to care about the humiliation he had suffered. The face in front of her overlapped with that of her big brother from back then. Zhang Haoze was Big Brother, and Big Brother was Zhang Haoze. From the first time she saw him, she was sure of this. Big brother, Wan, please be gentler. She spoke very softly. She couldn't even guarantee that the other party would listen, but she had to say it. This was her first time, and the man on top of her was the big brother that she had been longing for so long. She had never wanted to be with another man in her life. If she was destined to have a man, she wanted her first time to be with her big brother. His lips were sealed once more, but this time it was less urgent than before. There was a hint of gentleness in his tone. The man was trying his best to control himself. Ling Shui's move was extremely ruthless. There was no way he could resist the effects of alcohol and drugs. Perhaps there was a trace of clarity, but that trace of clarity disappeared when Shi Mengwan called him dear brother. The woman's eyes were like silk, and her body was soft. Her eyes were filled with gentleness. The flames that he had been restraining and suppressing just now were now completely ignited. Everything that happened after that was out of their control. Shi Mengwan's reality and memories were mixed together. Zhang Haoze and her dear brother had become one person. It was as if she had returned to the time when she was 12 years old. That arrogant and cold youth. But he treated her differently. Their skin was close, and their breaths were in harmony. She was like a cloud, floating up, down, and up with the wind. She floated beyond the clouds of the ninth heaven, unable to find a place to return to. However, she was also like a ship that had been floating on the sea. Now, she had found a place to return to. Dear brother, dear brother. The moment she experienced the pain, she almost wanted to cry. She hugged him tightly and felt what he gave her. The man's breathing became even heavier. She was broken into pieces and was no longer complete. However, he filled her up and finally returned to being complete. Back and forth, it kept repeating. This night was exceptionally long. Shi Mengwan didn't sleep for long. She was a person who couldn't sleep easily when she had something on her mind. At dawn, she opened her eyes. Looking at the sky that was about to brighten, she turned over. Her body was extremely uncomfortable and uncomfortable. It was as if her entire body had been disassembled. She followed the hand that was tightly wrapped around her waist and raised her eyes to look at the owner of the hand. Zhang Haoze had fallen asleep. His eyes were tightly closed. It seemed to be because of the intense exercise, but it also seemed to be because of the alcohol last night. His breathing was steady and long, and his chest rose and fell slightly. His face was no longer as red as it was yesterday. When he fell asleep, he didn't have the sinister aura that he had when he was awake. He looked completely harmless. She wanted to raise her hand and touch his face. Just such a simple action made her feel difficult. She wanted to sleep, but she couldn't. She felt tired when she got up. Seeing that the sky outside was getting brighter, Shi Mengwan finally decided to continue sleeping for a while. She turned around. Zhang Hao's hand was still wrapped around her waist. Because of her movements, the blanket slid to her waist. Because of this, Shi Mengwan also saw a scar on his left arm. That scar looked like it had been a long time ago, and the color was already very faint. His skin color was slightly pale. Therefore, this scar looked especially obvious. Yesterday, Shi Mengwan didn't have time to think, nor did she have time to seriously look at Zhang Hao's body. The sky was getting brighter, and the scar was getting clearer and clearer. It was about 5 centimeters long. Shi Mengwan raised her hand and gently caressed the spot. Her eyes suddenly felt a little sore. She had always believed that Zhang Hao was her dear brother. Now, this injury had completely confirmed her guess. Dear brother. When Shi Mengwan woke up in the morning, the young man was still sleeping. He had fought yesterday and suffered some injuries. Although they were all superficial wounds, his age also consumed a lot of vitality. Looking at the young man lying motionless on the bed, Shi Mengwan thought about the dozens of yuan she had given him yesterday. That money wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. She regretted coming out for a day. She just wanted to go back to her home now. But there was a problem now. Without money, how was she going to go home? Shi Mengwan was already 12 years old. She thought about it and decided to go straight to the police station and find a police officer to send her home. Before she left, she was a little hesitant. Should she tell Zhang Hao? However, she wasn't familiar with him. It was just that she stayed here for a day yesterday. She said that she was borrowing him, but she even gave him money. Shi Mengwan didn't feel guilty at all when she thought about it. She took a look at the small house and finally left. Shi Mengwan had a good idea. She just needed to find the nearest police station. However, after she came out of the young man's house, she found that she was lost. The bungalows in this area were almost the same, and the alleys were connected in all directions. Every door looked almost the same to her. Shi Mengwan went around for a long time, but not only did she not get out, she even got lost. Just as Shi Mengwan was about to find a public phone to stop and call the police, a voice suddenly rang out. She actually met the 2 people who had been following her yesterday. 2 hooligans stood in front of Shi Mengwan. One was wearing a flowery shirt, and the other was wearing a black shirt. The man in the black shirt took a step forward and glanced at Shi Mengwan's face. Yo, isn't this the little beauty from yesterday? The 2 of them had their eyes on Shi Mengwan yesterday. Such a young girl with good looks looked like she was alone and didn't have any family by her side. If they sold her, they would make a lot of money. Little beauty, since we met, it's fate. Come with your brothers. Shi Mengwan panicked when she saw these 2 people. She was lucky to escape yesterday, but it didn't mean that she would be so lucky today. Looking left and right, she ran back like she was flying. The 2 hooligans looked at each other and quickly followed behind her. Shi Mengwan wasn't familiar with this area, and she was being chased in a hurry. In her panic, she actually ran into a dead end. Little beauty, you can't run anymore, right? The man in the black shirt looked at Shi Mengwan, and the smile on his face became more and more vulgar. Don't run anymore. Follow your brother. Get lost. Shi Mengwan was anxious. She looked at the 2 people, then looked at the dead end in front of her, and fell into great despair. Seeing that the 2 hooligans were about to approach, she looked around in panic. Finally, she picked up a stone on the ground and held it in her hand, looking like she wanted to fight the 2 hooligans to the death. Little girl, you have character. Your brother likes you. The man in the flowery shirt glanced at the man in the black shirt, and the 2 of them moved forward together. Shi Mengwan waved the stone in her hand randomly. However, before she could hit the 2 of them, her hand was already grabbed by the 2 hooligans. Little beauty, let's go. Help! Help! Shi Mengwan cried out. Seeing this, the man in the flowery shirt covered Shermangwan's mouth. Woo-woo. Shermangwan was anxious. Regret once again occupied her heart. She shouldn't have run away from home. The two hooligans dragged her out and were about to run out when the figure of a youth suddenly appeared in front of them. When Shermangwan saw the person, her eyes widened. It was him, that dear brother. The youth stood at the entrance of the alley. His gaze swept across the two hooligans. Then he looked at Shermangwan. His eyes seemed to be filled with displeasure. Brat, don't be a busybody. The man in the flowery shirt glared at the youth and was quite rude. The youth stood there without moving or speaking. The two hooligans didn't take him seriously either, especially when they saw the injuries on the youth's face, not only on his face but also on his arms. They didn't take the youth seriously even more. When they passed by the youth with Shermangwan in tow, the youth didn't move. Shermangwan's mouth was blocked. She could only watch as the youth kept making whimpering sounds. The two hooligans didn't take the youth seriously and passed by him just like that. Unexpectedly, when they walked behind the youth suddenly turned around. He flew up and kicked the back of the man in the flowery shirt. The man in the flowery shirt was originally covering Shermangwan's mouth, but this sudden kick caught him off guard. The man in the flowery shirt was caught off guard. He let go of Shermangwan, and his body fell forward. Without waiting for the man in the flowery shirt to get up, the youth kicked the man in the black shirt again. The man in the black shirt was on guard after the man in the flowery shirt fell. The youth didn't succeed. He wasn't annoyed. He waved his hand at the man in the black shirt and punched him. His fists were hurried, quick, and ruthless. The man in the black shirt wasn't prepared for this and was hit head-on. Brat, you're courting death. The man in the black shirt rushed towards the youth. At the same time, the youth pulled Shermangwan away and faced the two hooligans. Shermangwan didn't know the youth's name. She watched the youth fight 1 against 2 and thought of the scene where he was surrounded and beaten up by a group of people yesterday. Be careful. After she shouted, she remembered that she didn't seem to know the youth's name. Seeing that the man in the flowery shirt also stood up and rushed towards the youth, she panicked. Dear brother, be careful. The word dear brother made the youth look at her. Before the man in the flowery shirt's fist swept over, he quickly threw a punch at the other party. The young man's martial arts were all developed through punches and kicks in actual combat. The two hooligans couldn't take advantage of him for a moment. The man in the black shirt was anxious. When the man in the flowery shirt was holding the youth back, he took out a knife from his pocket. However, he didn't point at the youth, but at Shermangwan. Shermangwan was stunned. She didn't expect such a sudden turn of events. Before she could react, the youth saw the man in the black shirt's actions and pounced in Shermangwan's direction. He hugged her tightly and tried to dodge the knife from the man in the black shirt. However, his arm was still stabbed by the man in the black shirt. Blood gushed out. The bright red blood stimulated the youth. There was still a knife in his arm, but it was as if he didn't care about his life. He pulled out the knife and rushed towards the two hooligans. Such a reckless move scared the two hooligans. The two of them actually fled in panic and didn't continue to tangle with him. Dear brother, are you okay? Shermangwan went forward and looked at the youth's bleeding arm. What should we do? You're bleeding a lot. Shut up. The youth glared at her and casually tore off his shirt and wrapped it around his arm. You have to go to the doctor like this. Dear brother, I'll send you to the doctor. Go to the doctor. The youth turned around and looked at Shermangwan. There seemed to be a hint of mockery on his face. Do you have money on you? Shermangwan bit her lip and was speechless for a moment. However, the youth just covered his bleeding arm and walked forward. Shermangwan didn't want to go home anymore. The other party had saved her, so she followed behind him worriedly. The young man turned into another alley, and there was an extremely small clinic there. The youth entered the door. There was a middle-aged man wearing a white coat inside. When he saw the youth enter and looked at the injuries on the youth's body, his expression immediately turned ugly. Why did you fight again? Do you want to die? The youth didn't say anything. He just pulled open the wound and showed it to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man stood up and looked at the youth's injury. It's a little serious. Although it didn't hurt the bones, it still needs stitches. But I don't have any anesthesia here. If you don't have it, then you don't have it. Cut the crap. Okay. You're quite capable. The middle-aged man was angry. After the youth sat down, he didn't give him any anesthesia and directly treated the youth's wound. When he was cleaning the wound, the youth's expression began to turn rather ugly. When the needle that was about to be stitched into the youth's flesh, the youth's entire body began to tremble. Dear brother? Sure, Mengwan wasn't an idiot. She had read the Romance of the Three Kingdoms and heard that Guangong scraped bones to treat wounds. However, the person in front of her wasn't Guangong. He was just a youth who looked 15 or 16 years old. Dear brother, are you okay? She couldn't help but glare at the doctor. You gave him anesthesia. Little girl, don't disturb me. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that the stitches will go smoothly. The middle-aged man didn't even raise his head. He just focused on stitching the wound. Don't worry, a few stitches will be enough. He won't die. But Shi Mengwan looked at the youth worriedly. His fists were clenched tightly, and large drops of sweat fell from his face. Shi Mengwan couldn't help but hold his wrist. He was injured because of her, and it was also because of her that he became like this. Dear brother, the doctor stitched the wound and was still in the mood to joke. Kid, when did you get to know a girl? She doesn't look like you. Shut up. The youth's voice was really unpleasant to hear at this moment. He glared coldly at the middle-aged man, then looked at Shi Mengwan. She held his wrist, looking as if it was more painful than him. Inexplicably, he felt that the wound on his arm didn't seem to hurt so much anymore. The wound was finally stitched up and treated. The middle-aged man retracted his hand and looked at the youth's face. All right, I won't say much. You've always had your own ideas. But I still have to remind you that your wound hasn't come into contact with water these few days, and you haven't carried heavy objects. Most importantly, for the sake of your life, you'd better not fight with others anymore. Got it. You're so long-winded. The youth stood up and moved his arm. Indeed, his bones weren't injured. It was just a flesh wound. He didn't care, nor did he thank him. He directly left the small clinic. Dear brother? Shi Mengwan quickly followed behind the youth. The youth's footsteps weren't fast, so she easily caught up to him. Thank you for today. Thank you. You're welcome. We're just even. The youth glanced at Shi Mengwan. Although Shi Mengwan was young, she understood what he meant at this moment. She helped the youth yesterday, and he helped her today. However, Shi Mengwan felt that this was different. If it weren't for the youth today, she would have been taken away by those two hooligans. She really didn't dare to think about what kind of fate she would have had. We're not even. Dear brother, you saved me. Thank you. She said it very sincerely, but the youth completely ignored her. He walked straight to his home. Shi Mengwan followed behind him. At this moment, she wasn't in the mood to think about going home. Instead, she was thinking about the doctor's words. The wound couldn't touch water, nor could it carry heavy objects. Dear brother was only one person, and he saved her. She couldn't be ungrateful. Even if she wanted to go home, she would think about it in a few days. With this thought in mind, Shi Mengwan followed behind the youth. Dear brother, what's your name? Dear brother, you were really amazing just now. Dear brother, that doctor is too bad. He actually didn't give you anesthesia. Dear brother, does your wound still hurt? Dear brother, what's your surname? Dear brother, my name is Shi Mengwan. You can call me Wan. That's what my mother calls me. Dear brother, shut up. The youth, who had been followed and questioned all the way, stopped and glared at Shi Mengwan. If you keep making noise, I'll beat you up. As he spoke, he raised his hand, as if he really wanted to hit her. Shi Mengwan stood still. Her eyes were clear and pure. She believed him without a trace of fear. The youth felt defeated. He glanced at Shi Mengwan, turned around, and continued walking forward. Dear brother? After entering the door, Shi Mengwan wanted to speak, but the youth suddenly stopped and stood in front of her. He was much taller than her. He stared at her face with a fierce gaze. Listen, you can stay, but you have to follow my rules. What rules? It wasn't like she wanted to stay. She just wanted to take care of him for a few days until his wound healed. The rule is to shut up. When I don't let you speak, you're not allowed to speak. Big. Also, you're not allowed to call me dear brother. But my name is Qiao Zhe. You can call me Ah Zhe. Qiao Zhe's voice sounded very fierce. Shi Mengwan bit her lip and looked at his eyes. She said timidly, but I think dear brother sounds better. Xiao Zhe glared at Shi Mengwan. His uninjured right hand clenched into a fist again. Shi Mengwan's gaze was too calm. He raised his hand and put it down again. Okay, since you call me dear brother, then go wash my clothes. Shi Mengwan didn't expect Xiao Zhe to really let her stay. She nodded. Okay, I'll help you wash your clothes. Anyway, when she was at home, she helped her family wash their clothes. She didn't think that this was a difficult situation. Instead, she felt that this was an opportunity to repay Xiao Zhe for saving her life. Xiao Zhe watched as Shi Mengwan walked into the bathroom in a few steps. When she really went to wash his clothes, his gaze became a little complicated. Just like that, Shi Mengwan stayed at Xiao Zhe's house. Shi Mengwan caressed the scar on Zhan Hao's arm. This scar was left behind to save her. Seeing this, she no longer had a doubt, nor did she have to look for it. Zhan Hao was dear brother, and dear brother was Zhan Hao. But why didn't Zhan Hao remember her at all? Could it be that she was the only one who held onto that memory of the past, but dear brother had completely forgotten about it? The hand that was originally pressing on Zhan Hao's scar was grabbed by someone. The person who was originally asleep had woken up at some point in time. At this moment, he was staring at her with his eyes open. Because he had just woken up, Zhan Hao's gaze was calm at this moment. His eyes were deep, but there was no trace of hostility. Shi Mengwan could even see a faint sense of peace in his gaze. Their eyes met, and there was silence. Shi Mengwan looked at him and was the first to look away. You're awake? After asking a useless question, Shi Mengwan lowered her eyes uncomfortably. It was one thing to be prepared yesterday, but it was another to have sex. In the end, she was still a little shy. She didn't even dare to look into his eyes. Zhan Hao didn't say anything, but she couldn't help but say, "Dear brother." When these three words came out, Zhan Hao's expression changed slightly. Shi Mengwan lowered her head, but she didn't notice the change in his expression at all. Dear brother, are you all right now? His appearance yesterday made her a little worried. She cared about him so much that she even forgot the discomfort on her body. Dear brother, how are you now? More than 10 years of concern, more than 10 years of searching. Shi Mengwan, who had never given up and never gave up. Not getting a response from Zhan Hao, she couldn't help but look up at him. Chapter 655. Being stared at like this, Shi Mengwan's exposed shoulder skin was inexplicably stained with a layer of coldness. She shrank her shoulders and looked at Zhan Hao with uncertainty. Big brother? Zhan Hao turned over and pressed her under his body. He looked down at her face. Dear brother. He raised his hand and gently pinched her chin. Who are you calling? Big brother? He was very heavy, and Shi Mengwan couldn't breathe under his weight. I'm calling you. Aren't you my dear brother? Shi Mengwan didn't understand. She didn't know why he didn't remember her and didn't recognize her. However, that scar, as well as his appearance, had long since been engraved in her heart, and she had never forgotten it. Big brother, have you forgotten? I'm Wan. Zhan Hao stared at her face. He moved closer and looked into her eyes. He exerted a little force in his hand. So, you thought I was someone else's substitute yesterday? What substitute? Shi Mengwan was stunned for a moment and couldn't come back to her senses for a moment. After realizing what Zhan Hao meant, she shook her head quickly. No, big brother, I didn't think of you as someone else. She only knew that the person in front of her was the big brother that she had been thinking about. Why? Why didn't he admit it? He clearly was, yet he refused to admit it. He had forgotten her. He had forgotten everything that had ever existed between them. He felt hurt and a little anxious. They were already like this. She wanted to refresh his memory, to make him remember that they used to be. Big brother, look at me. I'm Shi Mengwan. You're Wan. He pinched his lower jaw. Zhan Hao looked at her face, and his voice was as cold as the ice in December. So, you like to play this kind of game? This isn't a game. I'm not treating you like someone else. He was the big brother, not someone else. You didn't treat me as someone else? Zhan Hao sneered. Did she think you would believe her? Then who is the big brother you're calling? It's you. Shi Mengwan looked at him with a firm gaze. The dear brother I'm calling is you. You're my big brother. TCH, she felt pain on her lips. He had bitten her. Shi Mingwan blinked at him. Dear brother, she couldn't speak the rest of her voice, because Jean Hauze had already kissed her lips. I'm not your big brother. Don't call me that. Big. Shi Mingwan's big word was swallowed up again. This time, Jean Hauze bit harder than before. I'll say it again, don't call me dear brother. Shi Mingwan bit her lip and looked at Jean Hauze. Her expression changed from anticipation to disappointment, from determination to confusion. For a moment, she even suspected that she was wrong. Jean Hauze's arm was on her side, and the scar was clear. Shi Mingwan didn't know why he didn't recognize her, nor did she know why he forgot. However, she had indeed developed a lot of negative emotions because of his forgetfulness. He was naked, and she could feel the heat of his skin. That kind of temperature made her lose her mind again. Big brother. Jean Hauze didn't stand on ceremony with her this time. The devouring tongue and lips robbed her of her breath. His big hand reached under the blanket. Soon, Shi Mingwan couldn't call him dear brother anymore. The effects of alcohol and drugs, and Shi Mingwan treating him as another man, made him angry. He robbed her of everything without any hesitation. In the end, Shi Mingwan could only let out broken words. Under his attack, she was utterly defeated. Chen Feifei threw the cup in her hand on the ground, her face full of anger. She glared at the maid in front of her with a gloomy look in her eyes. What do you mean? What do you mean, brother? How didn't come back yesterday? You better explain yourself clearly. The maid shivered. Chen Feifei's temper was completely unleashed on them. Miss, young Master Jean really didn't come back yesterday. There was no one in his room. Of course, Chen Feifei knew that there was no one in Jean Hauze's room. But she didn't give up. She only thought that Jean Hauze had gone out early. Jean Hauze had the habit of morning exercise. He had to get up every morning and take a step. She thought that he had gone for a run. Asked Xiao Chen to drive the car over. I'm going out. Chen Feifei knew how to drive, but her health wasn't good, so her family was worried. For his daughter's convenience, Chen Yongchang assigned her a driver. Yes. Before Chen Feifei went out, she called Chen Yongchang and asked him what Jean Hauze's arrangements were yesterday. Chen Yongchang didn't know what his precious daughter was going to do, but he still told her about Jean Hauze's whereabouts yesterday. After asking, Chen Feifei went straight to the company. The Chen Corporation was also very famous in Lin City. Chen Yongchang started out in the aquaculture business. Later, he saw an opportunity. He started investing in real estate. He was also lucky and encountered a good opportunity. For a few years, his business was very big. He also had his own business in the neighboring city. In the past few years, with Jean Hauze's participation, he listened to his words and began to expand into other industries. Now, the company was also quite large. Chen Feifei's car stopped at the company building. Everyone in the company knew Chen Feifei and knew that this young miss couldn't be offended. The front desk came out early in the morning and led the way for Chen Feifei. Chen Feifei went upstairs in an imposing manner and went straight to Jean Hauze's office. However, Jean Hauze was in the office. This made Chen Feifei's expression even uglier. She started to call Jean Hauze continuously. Jean Hauze was woken up by the ringing of his phone. He didn't pick up the phone. Instead, he turned off the phone. When he got up, he looked at the unfamiliar environment in front of him and remembered where he was. Under the blanket, he couldn't find anything. He looked at Shi Mingwan, who was sleeping beside him. The woman's blanket barely covered her chest. The skin on her shoulder that wasn't covered by the blanket was covered with bruises. Jean Hauze rarely lost control. No, it could be said that he had never lost control before. But last night, he lost control. Ling Shui's drug was indeed powerful. Mixed with alcohol, although it was quite difficult for him to resist, it wasn't really impossible for him to resist. But he lost control. Jean Hauze rubbed the space between his eyebrows. His expression didn't look good. His gaze fell on Shi Mingwan's face. She was still sleeping very soundly. There was a faint green under her eyes, and her face was slightly pale. Jean Hauze's expression became even uglier. His loss of control was mostly because of this woman's smell. He rubbed the space between his eyebrows and quickly got up. When he found his wet clothes in the bathroom, his phone rang again. He looked at the phone on it and picked it up. Drive the car to your Yuan apartment and pick me up. All right, help me bring a set of clothes over. I need them both inside and out. After hanging up the phone, Jean Hauser took a shower. When he came out of the bathroom, he only had a bath towel around his waist. Shi Mingwan was still sleeping and didn't show any signs of waking up. He stood by the bed and stared at her face for a long time. When there was a knock on the door, he left the room. The person standing outside the door was Tang Hua, his personal assistant. He didn't have any doubts about Jean Hauser appearing in an unfamiliar place. He just handed the bag in his hand to Jean Hauser. From the inside to the outside, there were shoes and clothes. Jean Hauser turned around, pulled off the bath towel, and began to change his clothes. Young Master Jean, Miss has been looking for you since she woke up. She seems to have gone to the company now. Yes, young Master Jean. Yesterday, Tang Hua wasn't a talkative person, but there were some things that he was indeed very concerned about. That woman, Ling Shui, drugged me. Jean Hauser put on his clothes and turned to look at Tang Hua. I'll leave the Ling family to you. I don't want to see this company again in the business world. Yes. Tang Hua had always obeyed Jean Hauser's orders. Jean Hauser had already tidied himself up. He looked at Tang Hua. Let's go to the company first. Yes. Tang Hua followed Jean Hauser, and the two of them left together. The moment the door closed, Jean Hauser looked in the direction of the room, but quickly looked away. Coincidentally, Sherman Wan's apartment was very close to the company. Before going upstairs, Jean Hauser instructed Tang Hua a few things. A flash of surprise flashed across Tang Hua's eyes, but it was only for a moment. He quickly lowered his head. Yes, I got it. Go. He was very relieved to leave the matter to Tang Hua. Tang Hua drove the car away, and Jean Hauser entered the company hall. As soon as he entered, Secretary Lu Xian came over. General Manager Jean, Miss is throwing a tantrum upstairs. Look, I got it. Go to your work. Find a contract from yesterday and let Secretary Zhao file it. When Jean Hauser entered the door, Chun Feifei was sitting behind his desk, sulking. Brother Hao. When she saw Jean Hauser, even though Chun Feifei tried her best to control it, she still couldn't hide the anger on her face. Yes. Why are you here at the company? Brother Hao. His calm appearance made Chun Feifei even angrier. However, the angrier she was, the more aggrieved she looked. Brother Hao, where did you go yesterday? Why didn't you go home? She spoke with extreme resentment. Even though she was already furious, she didn't want her sweetheart to see her bad side. In fact, when Jean Hauser was in university, he made a sum of money by speculating in stocks and futures. Then, he bought a house near the university town. For a period of time, he used the excuse that he was busy with his studies and company matters. He didn't want to travel back and forth and lived in his apartment. However, Chun Feifei refused. She said that if Jean Hauser wanted to live in the apartment, she would follow him. Later, Chen Yongchang had no choice but to buy the apartment opposite Jean Hauser. However, Chun Feifei's health wasn't good, so she couldn't be alone. No matter how big the apartment was, it wasn't as comfortable as home. Chen Yongchang loved his daughter. He had no choice but to beg Jean Hauser to agree to move back home. In the end, Jean Hauser took a step back, but asked to wait until he graduated from university. This request wasn't too much. Chen Yongchang had no choice but to agree. After Jean Hauser graduated from university, he entered Chen Yongchang's company. He moved back to the Chen family. He would occasionally go to the apartment for 2 days. But every time, it would make Chen Feifei unhappy. I was too busy last night, so I slept in the apartment. Brother Hao, is what you said true? Chen Feifei looked like she was about to cry. Why did you lie to me? You didn't come back yesterday, so I asked the cleaning Annie to go to the apartment to take a look. You didn't go back at all yesterday. The apartment was cleaned regularly, and the person who arranged it was Chun Feifei. Jean Hauser looked at her with an unclear expression. The angrier she was, the more aggrieved she looked. The angrier she was, the more aggrieved she looked. Her eyes were red, and with her current expression, she looked weak and frail. Brother Hao, you actually lied to me? You never lied to me before. Do you not care about me anymore? You didn't go home at all yesterday, and you weren't in the apartment. Brother Hao, I'm not checking on you. I'm just concerned about you. Don't you know how worried I was about you when you didn't go home? I really didn't go home yesterday. Zhang Haoze looked at Chun Feifei's face. He thought of Ling Shui. Brother Hao. Chun Feifei stopped complaining and looked at him with red eyes. However, there's a reason. Zhang Haoze walked to the sofa and sat down. He lowered his eyes and looked at the financial magazine on the coffee table. Chun Feifei didn't say anything. She just looked at him with concern. Yesterday, your dad asked me to sign a contract with Chairman Ling, I know. I asked Dad. Chun Feifei was angry in her heart, but she looked understanding on her face. I know that you've worked hard for the company over the past few years, but do you have to sign a contract all night? She pouted, and her eyes were still red as she looked at Zhang Haoze. Such a delicate beauty, in front of a man, showed such complete trust and was also full of gratitude. If it was another man, he would probably want to hold Chun Feifei in his arms and comfort her. Feifei, I didn't sign the contract all night, but something happened yesterday. Zhang Haoze raised his head and looked at Chun Feifei with a complicated expression. Something happened yesterday. What happened? Can you tell me? Chairman Ling's daughter, Ling Shui, was also there yesterday. She's very interested in me. What did you say? Chun Feifei stood up and looked at Zhang Haoze. She realized that she had lost control. She sat down in front of Zhang Haoze again and regained her worried expression. Doesn't she know about my relationship with you? She knows, but I think she doesn't care, right? But Chun Feifei almost twisted her fingers, but she forced herself to put on a victim's expression. Brother Hao, you're mine. Don't tell me you like that Shui. Feifei, I don't like her, but I did do something wrong to you yesterday. Brother Hao. Chun Feifei almost couldn't sit still. Zhang Haoze seemed to be a little helpless. She drugged me yesterday, and I drank some wine. Brother Hao. Chun Feifei's expression completely changed. She sat there with a pale face, as if she would collapse at any moment. What do you mean? Feifei, I'm sorry. Zhang Haoze didn't say anything else. What else did Chun Feifei not understand? You guys. You guys really? Really? Chun Feifei's face was pale, and she looked like she had been hit. Zhang Haoze lowered his head, looking like he didn't want to say anything more. Chun Feifei reached out and hugged Zhang Haoze tightly. Brother Hao, it's okay. It's okay. I know you didn't do it on purpose. You couldn't help it. I won't blame you. If she wanted to blame someone, blame that damn woman. Chun Feifei raised her head and looked at Zhang Haoze. Brother Hao, don't worry. I'm really not angry. I'll tell Dad to arrange less work for you in the future. Even if you want to talk about cooperation with others, I'll tell him to arrange more people for you. Feifei, there's no need. Not everyone is like Ling Shui. Of course, not everyone was as shameless as that woman. Chun Feifei was so angry that her gums started to hurt. Holding Zhang Haoze's arm, her voice was very soft. Brother Hao, thank you. You're enduring it for me. I won't take this matter to heart, and I won't be angry. Don't worry. Okay. Zhang Haoze nodded and didn't intend to continue this topic. You came here so early. Did you have breakfast? I didn't eat. You didn't come back all night. How could I be in a mood to have breakfast? I'll get someone to bring breakfast in. You can eat first. Okay. Chun Feifei nodded and wasn't in a hurry to leave. After eating with Zhang Haoze and telling him not to work too hard, she got up and left. However, she didn't go home as she had told Zhang Haoze just now. Instead, she went around to Chen Yongchang's office. Damn woman, damn Ling Shui. She dared to steal her man. She wanted to teach her a lesson. After Chun Feifei left, Zhang Haoze's face didn't have the same expression as before. He stood up expressionlessly and walked to the back of his desk to sit down. It would take some time for Tang Hua to swallow Ling's company. Before that, he would leave a small role like Ling Shui to Chun Feifei. After all, he was very clear about Chun Feifei's combat strength after all these years. Chun Feifei thought that she had disguised herself very well in front of him, but she didn't know that no matter how she disguised herself, her true nature would still be revealed. After dealing with Chun Feifei and Ling Shui, Zhang Haoze was in a good mood. The moment he opened the file, Sherman Wan's sleeping face suddenly flashed across his mind. She was exhausted yesterday. At this time, she should still be sleeping, right? Zhang Haoze, who realized what he was thinking, had an ugly expression on his face. He retracted his thoughts and focused all his attention on work. When Shi Mingwan woke up, it was already past afternoon. The room was empty, and there was no sound at all. Zhang Haoze had already left. Shi Mingwan bit her lip and turned over. This simple action made her entire body feel uncomfortable. She felt a little wronged and a little disappointed. Zhang Haoze ran away, just like that, after having sex with her. He didn't care at all. It was her first time. This realization made her uncomfortable. Not only her body, but also her heart. Her heart felt even more uncomfortable. Dear brother didn't acknowledge her and forgot about her. Now, he treated her like an antidote, throwing her away after using her. All of this filled Shi Mingwan with disappointment. Her disappointment didn't last for long. After realizing what time it was, Shi Mingwan quickly got up to look for her phone. Her phone was left in the study next door yesterday. Sure enough, there were at least dozens of missed calls from morning until now. Most of them were from colleagues in the studio, and one was from Su Qingsang. She was still feeling very uncomfortable, so she didn't plan to go out today. She told Xiao Ji that she was sick and wasn't feeling well. She wanted to rest at home for 2 days. If there was anything, she could email her or call her. She called Su Qingsang again. She asked her to go to her place for dinner. After telling her that there was an event at the company, Shi Mingwan hung up the phone. She went to the kitchen and casually cooked a bowl of noodles for herself. She was still feeling uncomfortable, so she went back to sleep after taking a shower. Shi Mingwan, who was sleeping, once again dreamed of the winter when she was 12 years old. It rarely snowed in Lin City, but the winter here was still considered cold. They lived in that small bungalow. There was no heating, air conditioning, or heater. There was only one blanket in Xiao Zhe's house. It turned out that during the summer, Shi Mingwan, who slept on the sofa, was covered with a blanket. Now that the weather was cold, she couldn't cover herself with a blanket. Shi Mingwan was woken up by the cold for several nights. Then, she could only wrap herself tightly with the blanket, but it was useless. On the third night, Xiao Zhe woke up. He looked at Shi Mingwan and told her to sleep on the bed. Dear brother, I'll sleep on the bed. Are you going to sleep on the sofa? At that time, Shi Mingwan was still very naive. However, Xiao Zhe was only a teenager. Compared to her, the sofa was even smaller for him. He couldn't even stretch his feet straight when he slept on it. Shi Mingwan took the initiative to speak after seeing how Xiao Zhe slept. Are you going to sleep? Yes. Shi Mingwan was really afraid of the cold. At that time, it was already past the mid-autumn festival of the lunar calendar. It would be even colder later on. She didn't want to be cold. However, she didn't expect that when she slept on the bed, Xiao Zhe would also sleep on the bed. At first, Shi Mingwan was a little awkward and uncomfortable, but after sleeping for 2 days, she was completely at ease. The youth's gaze was calm, and Shi Mingwan's gaze was clear. One treated the other as a sister, and the other as a brother. The pure friendship between siblings wouldn't have any bad thoughts. Shi Mingwan dreamed of the first night Zhe slept with her. She still remembered that she was still a little embarrassed. She went to bed early and curled up on one side of the bed, occupying a very small space. However, dear brother slept in the middle of the bed rather rudely. At that time, he really didn't sleep well. Sometimes, when he fell asleep, he would squeeze over to her side. At this time, Shi Mingwan could only move out more and more carefully. She also had to be careful not to fall under the bed. Later, the knocking on the door woke Shi Mingwan up from her dream. She was very tired and sleepy. She was woken up by someone and didn't want to get up to open the door. However, the knocking on the door didn't seem to give up. It was still going on. Shi Mingwan had no choice but to get up, put on a coat, and open the door. Unexpectedly, the person standing outside was actually Zhang Haoze. Zhang Haoze looked at Shi Mingwan. After sleeping for a day, her face had recovered a little, but it still didn't look good. He entered the door silently. His attitude was as comfortable as if he was returning to his own home. Zhang Haoze. He didn't like to call her dear brother, so she wouldn't call him that. But what did he mean now? Didn't he leave? Didn't he only treat her as the antidote? Since that was the case, then why did he come back? Chapter 656. Zhang Haoze entered the door and walked to the sofa to sit down. His relaxed expression made Meng feel a little unhappy, as if he treated this place as his home. Didn't he leave? Since he left, why did he come back? While she was unhappy, she felt a little expectant. Did John Hauser remember what happened in the past? Or she pursed her lips, took a few steps forward, and stood by the coffee table. She didn't sit down. She just stood there and looked at him. John Hauser was tall. Even if he was sitting, he wasn't much different from Meng, who was standing. The two of them looked at each other like this. You. Meng tried her best to control her emotions and not let herself show even a trace of happiness. In fact, compared to Jean Hauser disappearing without a trace, his appearance now made her feel more or less comforted. What's the matter? Meng's tone sounded a little cold. Jean Hauser narrowed his eyes slightly. She had probably just woken up, and her hair was a little messy. She was wearing a black sports coat and a set of pink pajamas inside. The nondescript combination gave her a sense of laziness. The V-neck of the pajamas made him see the snow-white skin at a glance. There were still purplish-red hickeys on it. He could easily remember how he had left marks on her body yesterday. The memories of last night made John Hauser a little stiff. Next month, his tense face looked a little solemn. His gaze returned to Meng's face, and he took out a box from his pocket. He placed it on the coffee table and pushed it forward. Eat it. Meng didn't see what it was at first, but after she saw it clearly, her expression suddenly changed. On the coffee table, the word Yuding was written on the box, which deeply stimulated Meng's nerves. Jean Hauser. She stood there, feeling a chill in her hands and feet. Yesterday, she and he had slept together like a pair of mandarin ducks, but today, he had given her this. I should thank you for your thoughtfulness now, shouldn't I? Last night was just an accident. She hadn't had time to recover from the fact that she had a relationship with Jean Hauser. His actions today were like a basin of cold water that was poured over her head. She really hadn't thought about children. It was too far away for her. Moreover, to Jean Hauser, she might just be an irrelevant passerby. He had lost his head last night, and he thought of her as an antidote. No matter which one it was, she really didn't think about the child and even forgot to take precautions. Jean Hauser didn't say anything. Meng stood there and felt her hands and feet gradually regain some warmth. She took a step forward and picked up the box of medicine. Sorry to trouble you. I'll take the medicine. I'll eat later. You can go. Jean Hauser didn't move, and Meng didn't want to be entangled with him. Yesterday was a dream come true. She kept thinking about her dear brother and finally had a chance to interact with him, even if this kind of interaction was just a one-sided dream. Today, Jean Hauser would let her know that if this was a dream, it could only be a nightmare. She couldn't tolerate it, she couldn't let it go, and she couldn't accept that her big brother had become like this. Mr. Jean, please. Jean Hauser looked at her face as if he didn't understand what she was angry about. He stood up and walked in front of her. His gaze fell on the box in her hand. Are you angry? Meng stood there without moving. There was a hint of stubbornness in her expression. She was very beautiful, with a delicate beauty in her stubborn expression at this moment. Her red lips were slightly opened, and she refused to give in to him. Her eyes were full of momentum. Jean Hauser turned his face slightly, and his body involuntarily took half a step forward. He stared at the arrogance on her face. Didn't you say to take the medicine? Meng suddenly looked at him. For a moment, her eyes were indescribably complicated. She gritted her teeth and clenched her fists, which were hanging by her side. She glared at Jean Hauser and quickly turned around to go to the kitchen. When she came out of the kitchen, there was a glass of water in her hand. She opened the medicine in front of Jean Hauser. She took out a pill and was about to put it in her mouth when Jean Hauser suddenly held her hand. Meng's hand stopped in midair. She looked at Jean Hauser with confusion and mockery. What are you doing, Mr. Jean? Jean Hauser slowly took the pill from her hand. He leaned over and looked at Meng's face. He placed the pill and a glass of water back on the coffee table. Mr. Jean, this medicine will have an effect if it's taken within 72 hours. And then? Jean Hauser pulled Meng's body into his arms. If that's the case, Then don't waste this time. Shi Mengwan quickly understood what he meant. He carried her in his arms and carried her to the room. Shi Mengwan's expression changed drastically when she realized what he wanted to do. Zhang Haoze, are you crazy? He didn't love her. Yesterday was an accident. Did he still want to continue today? Zhang Haoze, put me down. The distance from the living room to the room was too short. Shi Mengwan felt that in less than 10 seconds, she had already been placed on the bed by Zhang Haoze. The moment her body touched the bed, she quickly bounced up and wanted to leave from under Zhang Haoze. However, she was once again pressed under Zhang Haoze's body. As she got up, he restrained her hands. At the same time, he kissed her lips. Woo-woo. Shi Mengwan couldn't say the rest of her words. Her body still had the feeling he gave her yesterday. Her back was sore and her legs were weak. She wasn't his match at all. Her coat was taken off and thrown on the ground. The thin pajamas inside weren't an obstacle to Zhang Haoze at all. He easily tore the pajamas into pieces. Shi Mengwan was like a peeled egg. She appeared in front of him without any cover at all. This also made it much easier for Zhang Haoze. He could see the marks on her body more clearly. Her skin was very good. Her body was very delicate and white. The more it was like this, the more obvious the marks that hadn't faded became. Those marks were left by him. Zhang Haoze, Shi Mengwan, didn't want to continue with him. She struggled to get up, but he easily suppressed her with one hand. He kissed her lips again, not giving her a chance to make a sound, nor did he give her a chance to resist. Everything had just begun. Shi Mengwan washed her clothes and tidied up Qiao Zhe's 2 extremely small rooms. Finally, she went to the kitchen and looked at the things in the kitchen. Yes, there was an electric rice cooker, a pot, and even a pressure cooker. The pots, bowls, ladles, and pots were all complete. There were also daily necessities, rice, oil, and salt. Shi Mengwan tidied up the kitchen, came out of the kitchen, and went to look for Qiao Zhe. Dear brother? Ah! Unexpectedly, she saw Qiao Zhe changing his clothes. She let out an ah and quickly turned around. The young man's shirt was covered in blood. He had no choice in the small clinic just now. Now that he was out, he naturally had to change. He still had to go out at night. The young man's body was slender, so there was nothing to look at. However, Shi Mengwan was still a little girl, so she naturally felt embarrassed. What are you screaming for? Qiao Zhe impatiently buttoned 2 buttons on his shirt and walked in front of Shi Mengwan. Haven't you seen it before? It wasn't that she hadn't seen it before. When she was at home, her father and a few uncles would also be bare-chested. However, those were her family. And Qiao Zhe, why did you call me? Shi Mengwan realized that he was already dressed, so she only dared to look up at him. The young man had recovered quite well. Yesterday, his face was bruised and swollen, but today his injuries had healed a lot. She pursed her lips and told him about her discovery. I just realized that there's rice in the kitchen. Look, it's not healthy for you to eat outside. Why don't we buy some vegetables and cook at home? Of course, Qiao Zhe knew that there was rice and oil at home, but the problem was, do you know how to cook? Yes. She was the eldest daughter in the family. When her mother was pregnant, she was the one who helped with the chores. Every day, when she came home from school, she had to cook for her parents. The young man glanced at Shi Mengwan and suddenly sneered. Buy vegetables? Where did you get the money? Didn't I yesterday? Shi Mengwan's words were interrupted by the young man. You mean your dozens of yuan? I just paid the medical fees. Shi Mengwan let out an ah. She didn't remember seeing the young man pay, but since he said he paid, then he paid. At this moment, the young man suddenly approached Shi Mengwan with an evil smile on his face. Why don't I sell you? That way, I'll have money to buy vegetables. Shi Mengwan was shocked by his sudden approach, but she shook her head firmly. You won't sell me. You're not me. How do you know I won't? I know anyway. You just won't. After Shi Mengwan said this, she lowered her head. She wasn't in the mood to argue with Qiao Zhe now. If there's no vegetables, then there's no vegetables. Then let's eat plain rice. I'll do it. After paying the medical fees, she had no money to buy vegetables, so she could only eat plain rice. Shi Mengwan entered the kitchen, but she began to feel a little conflicted. Dear brother was still injured, so he should eat better. But in this situation, he He couldn't even eat vegetables. How could she give dear brother nutrition? Perhaps she should think of a way to earn money? When Shi Mingwan washed the rice, she began to be a little lost in thought. What could she do? She was only 12 years old, so she definitely wouldn't be able to find a job. Perhaps she could start collecting trash tomorrow, but that wasn't good either. She wasn't familiar with this place. These alleys were full of twists and turns, so she wouldn't be able to recognize them all without some time. Why don't I tell dear brother? Let him bring her along? If he wasn't willing, then she would think of another way. She washed the rice and put it into the rice cooker. She measured the water and plugged it in. When the rice was ready, Shi Mingwan leaned against the kitchen stove in a daze. In the past, her parents would occasionally give her pocket money at home. At that time, she still felt that she didn't have much use for money. If she had known earlier, she would have taken more money when she ran away from home. Now it was all right. She heard the sound of the door closing and came out of the kitchen. She found that Xiao Zhe had returned at some point in time. He was holding 2 bags in his hand. When did you go out? Shi Mingwan didn't see him go out at all. Why did he come in from outside now? Go cook. The youth handed the bag in his hand to Shi Mingwan. Shi Mingwan looked at the vegetables inside. There were potatoes, tomatoes, vegetables, eggs, and meat. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough for 2 people. Where did you get the money? Didn't he say that he had no money just now? Cut the crap. Didn't you say that you know how to cook? Go quickly. Shi Mingwan nodded and took the vegetables into the kitchen. Her cooking skills weren't good, but she was used to doing housework, so she moved quickly. In less than an hour, 3 dishes and a soup were ready. After she finished, she realized that she seemed to have cooked a little too much. There were only the 2 of them eating, so why would they need so much? However, what happened next exceeded her expectations. Not only did the youth eat all the dishes she cooked, but he also finished the rice she cooked for 2 people in the rice cooker. The way he wolfed down the food made Shi Mingwan wonder if this person hadn't eaten for a few days. After eating, Shi Mingwan could tell that the youth was in a good mood. This also meant that she could stay here. Shi Mingwan washed the dishes and tidied up the kitchen. She thought that Xiao Zhe was actually quite a good person. He had saved her and taken her in. When Shi Mingwan was about to take a shower at night, she finally realized the problem. She originally thought that she could go home today, so she wore this outfit yesterday. She could barely sleep on the sofa with her clothes on. But today, she was caught by those 2 hooligans and ran so far away. Her body was even stained with Xiao Zhe's blood. Her clothes were so dirty that she couldn't wear them anymore, but there were no clothes she could wear here. Shi Mingwan thought about it and went to look for Xiao Zhe. Dear brother, do you have any extra clothes? Xiao Zhe was taller than her, so he definitely didn't have any clothes she could wear. But she still wanted to ask. A t-shirt will do. Any clothes will do. After eating, the youth was busy in his room. When he heard her words, he glanced at her. He had noticed just now that the clothes on the girl's body were stained with his blood. He went to the closet, found a t-shirt, and threw it to her. The youth was taller than her, and the t-shirt was also longer. Shi Mingwan took the shirt and thought that it could be used as pajamas. She went to the bathroom to take a shower, then changed her clothes and washed them. In the end, when she put on the long t-shirt and was about to go out, she found a problem. She didn't have any underwear inside, so it felt strange. She stayed in the bathroom for a long time, not knowing how to get out. Perhaps she could trouble Xiao Zhe again, ask him to buy a set of underwear for her. Someone knocked on the bathroom door a few times, and Xiao Zhe's voice sounded outside the door. Did you die inside? Come out, I want to brush my teeth. No matter how embarrassed Shi Mingwan was, she had no choice but to come out. When she met Xiao Zhe's seemingly dissatisfied gaze, she shrunk her neck in the basin with the washed clothes in her hand. I also washed the clothes. Xiao Zhe didn't look at her, but went into the bathroom. Shi Mingwan heaved a sigh of relief and took the clothes to the small balcony to dry them. She felt uncomfortable while she was drying the clothes. She blocked Xiao Zhe a few times and wanted him to make another trip, but she couldn't open her mouth. In the end, she could only pull down the t-shirt with all her might and sit on the sofa, not daring to move. When Xiao Zhe came out and was about to leave, he saw Shi Mingwan like a primary school student. Her legs weren't tight, and her hands were placed on her knees without moving. You going out?" Seeing that Xiao Zhe was about to leave, Shi Mingwan immediately stood up. However, when she realized what she was wearing, she took a step back. "Dear brother, are you going out now?" "Yes, what's the matter?" Although it was very late, he still had something to do. "Then, when you come back, can you help me bring some clothes back?" "Bring clothes?" The youth glared at her, and his tone was exactly the same as when she asked him to buy groceries just now. "Do you have money?" Money was Shi Mingwan's weakness. She bit her lip and shook her head. The youth snorted and turned around to leave. Shi Mingwan was anxious and grabbed his hand without thinking. Then even if I don't have money to buy clothes, can you buy me a set of underwear?" When Shi Mingwan said the last two words, her voice was so soft that it was almost like a mosquito buzzing. Of course, Xiao Zhe didn't hear her clearly. "Buy what?" "Underwear." Shi Mingwan said it again. Her face was almost red to the base of her neck, and she was very embarrassed. The youth's gaze swept across Shi Mingwan's body. His thin t-shirt covered Shi Mingwan's body, and it looked a little awkward for a small person to wear an adult's clothes. The young girl had already begun to develop. The two places in front of her body weren't full of waves, but they were slightly bulging. The youth's gaze looked down, but it was only for a moment before he quickly retracted it. "You sleep first." The youth glanced at her. "I'm going out for a while. We'll talk about it when I come back." "Okay." Shi Mingwan was indeed embarrassed. The dirty clothes had already been washed, and she had no clothes to wear now. She didn't dare to run out just like that, but she wasn't used to it being empty like it was now. In the end, Xiao Zhe left without looking back. After he left, Shi Mingwan carefully closed the door and sat down on the sofa. She seemed to have thought of a problem at this moment. Dear brother ran out just like that. It was so late. Where would there be clothes to sell? Shi Mingwan fell asleep when she was in a daze from waiting. By the time she woke up, it was already dawn the next day. When she heard the sound of the door opening, she quickly sat up from the sofa. Xiao Zhe entered the door from the outside. This time, he was carrying a big bag in his hand. When Shi Mingwan was sleeping just now, her clothes almost rolled up to her thighs. Now that Xiao Zhe was back, she hurriedly straightened the hem of her clothes and pulled them up. "Dear brother." Xiao Zhe wasn't a patient person. He directly threw the bag into her arms. The bag was a little heavy. Shi Mingwan instinctively caught it, hugged it, and looked inside the bag. When she opened it, there were clothes and underwear. She took it out and took a look. The clothes are the simplest jeans and t-shirt. This is for me. What else? Could he wear it? "Thank you, dear brother." Shi Mingwan hugged the clothes, her eyes filled with gratitude. However, dear brother, it seemed that he was really nice. "Go change." Xiao Zhe glanced at her. "As for the one you're wearing, I'll use it as your pajamas." "Thank you, dear brother." Shi Mingwan was extremely happy. Not only because dear brother bought her clothes, but also because dear brother was stubborn but soft-hearted. He said that he wouldn't care about her, but he still did. Dear brother was so nice. "Sister Shi, how about we order the takeout from the restaurant you mentioned last time?" "Sister Shi?" "Yes." Shi Mingwan came back to her senses and found that Xiao Qiu was staring at her with a puzzled gaze. Shi Mingwan sat up straight. "What did you say?" "I said, how about we order the takeout from the restaurant you mentioned last time? Didn't you say that you were tired of the previous ones?" "Okay." Shi Mingwan didn't object. "You decide. Then I'll go order." Xiao Qiu looked at Shi Mingwan and didn't ask further. However, before she left, her gaze swept across the design drawing in front of Shi Mingwan. Shi Mingwan naturally noticed her gaze. She looked at the design drawing, picked it up, and tore it up without hesitation. After tearing it up, she supported her forehead with one hand and half closed her eyes. She thought of Jean Hauser again. When she woke up this morning, Jean Hauser was no longer in the house. If it weren't for the glass of water and the box of birth control pills on the coffee table, Shi Mingwan would have thought that yesterday was her fantasy again. Jean Hauser, Xiao Zhe. These two people only had one word in their names, and they looked the same. But the way they did things was completely different. Dear brother was stubborn but soft-hearted. No matter what, he would protect her and take care of her. But what about Jean Hauser? What kind of person did he think she was? He came, And when is he pleased? She didn't see Jean Hauser this morning, and this was the second time. Sure, Meng-Wan couldn't help but feel a little wronged. What did Jean Hauser mean? For the next half a month, Sure Meng-Wan didn't see Jean Hauser again. After the Mid-Autumn Festival in Lin City, the weather began to cool down. It was December. Sure Meng-Wan's studio also began to get busy. At the end of every year, major companies would have many annual meetings. Often at this time, the orders would increase. Not only were there engagement dresses, but there were also many people who came to make dresses. Many people came in advance to prepare. Sure Meng-Wan became busy and didn't think too much about Jean Hauser. Occasionally, in the dead of night, she would think about what that person was doing. But soon, this kind of mood would be replaced by busyness. This kind of busyness continued until the end of December. As the wife of the president of Tianyu Group, Su Qing-Seng also had to attend the annual meeting of Tianyu Group. Her dress was prepared by Sure Meng-Wan. On the day of the meeting, Sure Meng-Wan also attended. Wan. When Sure Meng-Wan entered the door, Su Qing-Seng walked toward her. You're here? Yes. I have to see a lot of people today. I might not be able to take care of you. Take care of yourself later. Call me if you need anything. Don't worry, I'm not a child. I need you to take care of me wherever I go. Sure Meng-Wan really didn't need Su Qing-Seng to take care of her. She walked to the long dining table to get a drink. Her gaze fell on Su Qing-Seng. She might not even know it, but ever since she married Hu Jinyao, her temperament had begun to change. A hint of envy appeared in her eyes. Whether Hu Jinyao was the president or an employee, he was really good to Su Qing-Seng. Sure Meng-Wan casually took a drink and took a sip, only to realize that she was drinking wine. However, this wine tasted good, so she simply drank up the whole glass. The moment she put down the glass, she saw Jean Hauser's figure from afar. Chapter 657. Chen Feifei looked at Jean Hauser eagerly. There was obvious affection. She hooked her hand around Jean Hauser's arm, looking very intimate. Brother Hao, I didn't expect President Hua to be the president of Tianyu Group. He looked so young. Yes, Jean Hauser replied. He wasn't too surprised. He had dealt with Hu Jinyao before. Also, he is so good to his wife. Chen Feifei looked in Su Qing-Seng's direction, and she couldn't help but feel a bit envious. Who wouldn't envy a woman like Su Qing-Seng? To have a man like Hu Jinyao, who was not only rich and handsome, but also good to her. Jean Hauser didn't reply. Chen Feifei couldn't help but stand in front of him. Brother Hao, when we get married in the future, you will treat me like President Hua treats his wife, right? Jean Hauser pursed his thin lips and did not respond to Chen Feifei's words. Chen Feifei's eyes were filled with disappointment, but she forced herself to smile. Brother Hao, you'll always take care of me, right? Jean Hauser responded softly, and his voice was a little perfunctory. Chen Feifei was not annoyed. Jean Hauser had always been like this. If she wanted to be angry, she would have been angered to death. Anyway, she believed that she and Jean Hauser had been together for more than 10 years. This was something that no one could compare to. Brother Hao, I saw Miss Luo and Miss Song. Let's go and say hello. The Chen family had business dealings with both the Luo and Song families, and she also wanted to bring Jean Hauser to them. Go ahead. I'm going to the bathroom. Then go quickly and come back quickly. You know, when you're not around, I feel like I've lost my soul. Jean Hauser didn't respond to Chen Feifei's words. He took her hand away from his and went to the bathroom. Chen Feifei pursed her lips into a straight line. In a place where Jean Hauser couldn't see, there was a flash of gloominess in her eyes. She had spent a month fighting with Ling Shui. The conditions of the Ling family were similar to her family. Speaking of which, she could be considered a difficult woman to deal with. However, it was a pity that Ling Shui loved to play around. Relying on her good family background, she did not put men in her eyes. It was too easy to find dirt on such a woman. Chen Feifei spent a lot of effort to find Ling Shui's weakness. She was sure that Ling Shui was in a terrible fix now, and it was impossible for her to have the time to pester Jean Hauser anymore. Jean Hauser should have time to accompany her without that woman's entanglement, but he had become very cold to her recently. When she asked, He said he was busy with work. In fact, the company was really busy recently. In this way, she couldn't even lose her temper. He didn't even want to bring her to the banquet tonight. If she hadn't happened to see the invitation in his office, she wouldn't have known. Chen Feifei was a little annoyed, but she would not show all her negative emotions in front of Zhang Haoze. Curling up the corners of her lips, she walked towards the group of socialites with a perfect smile. She was the eldest daughter of the Chun family. She had to maintain her most appropriate side at all times. Shi Mingwan had already put down her wine glass when she saw Zhang Haoze. She tried to look as if she hadn't noticed, but her action of putting down the glass was a little forceful. For more than half a month, Zhang Haoze never appeared again. She treated those 2 nights as a dream. During this period of time, she constantly convinced herself that it was just a dream. She had already started to let go, but she saw such a scene again. She had heard from Su Qing saying that Zhang Haoze had a fiancé. She also remembered seeing Zhang Haoze and Chen Feifei together. At that time, the two of them didn't have a real relationship, and she wasn't 100% sure that the other party was Xiao Zhe. But now, she couldn't bear to watch any longer. She walked away from the table and headed for the bathroom. After leaving the banquet hall, Shi Mingwan's phone rang. It was a call from home. She took the phone and walked to the corner at the end of the corridor to answer it. The stairwell was right next to it, and it was far away from the elevator, so there was no need to worry about people coming over. Her mother asked her if she would go home on New Year's Day. Shi Mingwan didn't give a precise answer. There were many things to do at the end of the year. She really couldn't guarantee that she would have the time to go back. Your sister misses you very much. She's asked about you several times. He said he wanted to go to Lin City to see you. Shi Mingru was Shi Mingwan's younger sister. The little baby girl from back then was already 13 years old and was in junior high school. The little girl had been close to this sister since she was young. She wanted to be with her sister the moment she returned home. Okay, I think I'll go back when I'm free. You should come back when you're free. Your grandmother hasn't been in good health recently. She's been missing you. Grandmother would miss her? Didn't she always think of herself as a money-losing commodity? Even though she had earned money outside and even bought a house. In her grandmother's eyes, she was inferior to her uncle's cousin. Wasn't it a little ironic? She was already used to it. Her grandmother's preference for boys was engraved in her bones and couldn't be changed easily. Silence. Even if Shi Mingwan went back, she wouldn't go to see her grandmother. So there was no need to say anything else. Wan. Shi Mingwan's voice sounded a little cautious. Is there anything else? Mom? Are you still blaming your grandmother? It's nothing. Shi Mingwan leaned against the wall behind her. The wall was a little cold, but she felt that this could keep her awake. Mom, don't think too much. I'm not coming back because I don't have time. If I have time, I'll naturally go back. Wan. Shi Mingwan's voice had a hint of a sigh. After so many years, she had always felt that she had let this daughter down. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up. I'm outside. Okay, your dad misses you too. If you're free, come back and stay for a few more days. Got it. Shi Mingwan bit her lip. She thought for a moment and added, It's really not that I don't want to come back. It's the end of the year and there are a lot of things to do in the studio. Why don't I wait for the new year and come back to stay for a few more days? Shi Mingwan was just saying that. When the new year really came, she would have things to do again. Ever since she graduated and opened her own studio, she hadn't stayed at home for more than 7 days. Okay. I'll cook your favorite dishes when the time comes. Shi Mingwan was very happy. She nagged for a long time before hanging up. Shi Mingwan listened patiently and didn't interrupt her. After hanging up the phone, she saw a black shadow on the ground in front of her. Shi Mingwan was shocked. She took a big step back. She looked up. Zhang Haoze had arrived at some point in time. He stood there, and the light from behind shone on him. The angle of the backlight made his facial features a little unclear. He was tall and big. Perhaps it was because he was here to attend the banquet, but he was wearing a 3-piece suit. The dark patterned fabric stuck to his figure, making him look even taller and straighter. Shi Mingwan looked into his eyes and could clearly hear her own heartbeat. That was because she couldn't control the heartbeat of a woman toward a man. Half of it was because she knew that this man was her dear brother. His existence and his appearance could make her lose her peace of mind for the first time. She lowered her eyes and clenched her fists slightly. She actually had a lot to say and a lot to ask, but in the end, she gritted her teeth and walked past Jean Hauser, intending to leave. When she passed by Jean Hauser, her arm was tightly wrapped around by Jean Hauser. Her body froze there. She looked at him with a slightly cold gaze and suppressed emotions. He was also looking at her. His gaze was deep and unreadable. Shi Mengwan was wearing a long black goddess dress today. The V-neck design exposed the snow-white skin on her chest to the air. Behind was a thin black gauze fabric. From this angle, he could even see her waistline. Shi Mengwan felt that Jean Hauser was holding her arm a little tightly. She looked at that hand and then at Jean Hauser. "Mr. Jean, what's the matter?" "Mr. Jean?" Jean Hauser narrowed his eyes and suddenly pulled her body in his direction. Then, he hugged her and pushed her towards a stairwell. In a corner that couldn't be seen by the surveillance cameras, Jean Hauser pressed Shi Mengwan against the wall. Jean, their lips met, and all words were sealed in the kiss. Shi Mengwan was stunned for a moment. She looked at Jean Hauser and actually forgot to resist for a moment. His face was magnified in front of her eyes. The man in front of her was undoubtedly good-looking. Not only was he good-looking, but he also had a temperament that enchanted women. Cold, arrogant, and deep, with a hint of arrogance and untamed. Such a man was dangerous to women. He was like poppy soya. His lips were slightly cold. In this season, it was undoubtedly a little cold outside. Shi Mengwan had been outside for so long that her limbs were already cold. Compared to his lips, his chest was much warmer. She was hugged by him and stimulated by his kiss. Her limbs were warm, but at the same time, she regained her rationality and thought. What was he doing? He was kissing her. At the same time that he brought his fiancée to this banquet hall, he was actually kissing her here? What kind of person did he think she was? Shi Mengwan was furious. She tried to push him, but she couldn't push him away. She raised her foot to kick him, but he clamped her foot. Shi Mengwan tried to struggle, but she couldn't break free no matter how hard she tried. She was furious. She couldn't push Jean Hauser away, so she opened her mouth and bit his lips hard. However, she didn't expect Jean Hauser, who was already prepared, to let go of her at this moment. Shi Mengwan didn't notice and bit her lips. The pain made Shi Mengwan let out a low cry. She had bitten very hard just now, and the skin on her lips was even slightly broken. The pain made her even angrier. She looked at Jean Hauser. He was still trapping her between the wall and him. She raised her eyes and looked at him. Her gaze was filled with coldness. "Let go of me." The location wasn't right, so she couldn't shout. She deliberately lowered her voice and couldn't suppress her anger. "Jean Hauser, what do you mean? Your fiancé is still inside." "Jean Hauser, let go of me." Jean Hauser didn't answer her question. He looked at the anger on Shi Mengwan's face and narrowed his eyes slightly. "She's not my fiancé." This could be considered an explanation. After all, he had never had any romantic feelings for Chen Feifei. Who would believe it? Thinking about the only 2 times she met Jean Hauser and his performance with Chen Feifei was just short of hanging on him. Even if she wasn't his fiancée, she was still his girlfriend. Shi Mengwan was silent. Her body was tightly pressed against the wall. Her gaze wasn't focused on Jean Hauser, but on an unknown point behind him. "I understand. Mr. Jean, can you let go of me now?" Her reaction was beyond his expectations. Jean Hauser stared at her face and pursed his lips slightly. He looked at Shi Mengwan and had no intention of retreating. "Mr. Jean?" If he didn't move aside, she couldn't go back to the banquet hall. Although Su Qing-sang wasn't the main character today, she was no different from the main character. She might not have the time to look for her, but she didn't want Su Qing-sang to suspect her. "Did you take your medicine that day?" This extremely abrupt question made Shi Mengwan's expression change slightly. She seemed to suddenly understand why Jean Hauser was blocking her way. "Mr. Jean, what's wrong? Are you afraid that I'll use the child to threaten you or achieve some other goal?" Shi Mengwan sneered. Now, she felt that even if the other party was the dear brother that she missed dearly, she wouldn't be able to suppress the anger in her heart. "Don't worry, I've taken my medicine, and my period has already come. I'm not pregnant, and I won't use the child to do anything to you." After saying this extremely coldly, Shi Mengwan pushed Zhang Hao's body and quickly headed in the direction of the banquet hall. The moment her body left him, Zhang Hao raised his hand and almost grabbed her hand, but in the end, he lowered it again. He stared at Shi Mengwan's back. No one knew what he was thinking, but his gaze was deep. Shi Mengwan returned to the banquet hall and wasn't in the mood to stay any longer. Her lips were still hurting, and she had bitten them herself. She went to the bathroom to freshen up her makeup and covered up the color with lipstick. It looked normal, but it couldn't suppress her anger. She was a little angry, but because of the current occasion, she couldn't even flare up. In the banquet hall, there were also people who knew her who came to greet her. Shi Mengwan's studio was now a little famous. There were also some socialites who liked to order dresses from her. Shi Mengwan couldn't leave even if she wanted to. After patiently exchanging pleasantries with those people, Shi Mengwan finally found a chance to tell Su Qingsang that she could leave first. Su Qingsang knew that, like herself, she didn't like such occasions very much. She asked her to come to her house for dinner in a few days, then waved her hand and let her go. Coming out of the banquet hall, Shi Mengwan shrunk her neck when the cold wind blew. The weather was very good today, and the sun was shining brightly. When she came, she only wore a trench coat. Now that it was late at night, even though she was wearing a coat, she still felt cold. She got into the car. Before going home, she thought that the refrigerator at home was almost empty, so she directly ordered some fruits and fresh food online. It was already very late when she got home. Shi Mengwan entered the house and had just put down her bag and changed into her home clothes when someone knocked on the door. She thought that the fresh food she ordered had arrived, so she got up to open the door. Unexpectedly, it was Zhang Hao standing outside. Shi Mengwan blocked the door with her body and glanced at Zhang Hao. He was still wearing the three-piece suit from the previous cocktail party. The light in the corridor shone on his face. He was still expressionless, but his eyes were now staring at her with a burning gaze. She felt her heart skip a beat again, and her hand behind the door couldn't help but tighten. "What's the matter?" Zhang Hao didn't say anything. His gaze swept across her body. He tore off the pajamas she wore last time. The weather was a little cooler. She was wearing a pullover-style home dress. The pink bear on the front of the cotton dress looked especially cute. It didn't match her appearance at all, but it was surprisingly harmonious. Zhang Hao didn't say anything. He took a step forward and was so close that Shi Mengwan could smell the faint scent of mint on his body. She took a deep breath and tried her best to make her voice sound normal and calm. "Mr. Zhang, what's the matter?" She deliberately kept the distance between the two of them so that Zhang Hao wouldn't discover the fluctuations in her heart. She also didn't let him know that her heartbeat was out of order because of him and that her emotions were affected because of him. Her unapproachable appearance made Zhang Hao's brows furrow imperceptibly. "Why? You're not calling me dear brother anymore?" Shi Mengwan's hands behind the door tightened. She looked up at Zhang Hao and met his eyes. "Didn't you tell me not to call you that?" "Mr. Zhang, since you don't admit that you're my dear brother, then just take it that I've recognized the wrong person. It's getting late. Please go ahead." Shi Mengwan's palm exerted force and directly slammed the door shut. Zhang Hao, who didn't expect her to do this to him, was stunned and shut outside the door by her. Shi Mengwan didn't realize what she had done until she closed the door. She leaned against the door with a very ugly expression. Yes, he clearly said that he wasn't her dear brother, and he clearly didn't admit it. Why did he have to tease her heartstrings again and again? There was another knock on the door behind her. Shi Mengwan felt angry and didn't want to pay attention to it at all. The knocking on the door stopped. In less than 2 minutes, it sounded again. Shi Mengwan still ignored it and let him stay. Who cared what he wanted to do? Since he wasn't her dear brother, she had nothing to say to him. Shi Mengwan wanted to go back to her room to take a shower, but when she heard the knock on the door again, she couldn't restrain herself. She angrily ran to open the door and said without thinking, "Zhang Hao, what do you want?" You clearly, when she saw the delivery man standing outside with a confused face, Shi Mengwan's expression suddenly became very embarrassed. "Sorry, you, Miss Shi Mengwan, right? We're from T-Cat Direct. These are the goods you ordered from T-Cat. Thank you. Shi Mingwan awkwardly took the delivery box from the other party's hand. After signing, she was still a little embarrassed. I'm sorry. I wasn't angry at you just now. I know. You were angry at this gentleman, right? The courier stood a little to the side, and Shi Mingwan realized that Zhang Haoze hadn't left yet. The courier misunderstood and thought that the two of them were lovers quarreling. Miss, even if you quarreled with your boyfriend, don't lock him outside the door. When I stepped out of the elevator just now, I was almost shocked when I saw someone. You misunderstood. We're not. Thank you for your patronage. If you're satisfied, remember to give me a 5-star rating. The courier ignored Shi Mingwan's explanation. This matter had nothing to do with him. The other party took the list and walked towards the elevator. When he passed by Zhang Haoze, he didn't forget to blink at him. Sir, if your girlfriend is angry, you have to coax her. You have to coax her. Our T-Cat Direct can also order flowers online. If you need them, you can order them online at any time. This unexpected advertisement made Shi Mingwan didn't know what to say. She hugged the big box and was about to close the door, but this time she failed. Zhang Haoze wasn't prepared just now. But this time, he was prepared. She was still holding a box in her hand. Before she could close the door, he had already come in. You! Shi Mingwan wanted to chase him out, but Zhang Haoze directly closed the door. Zhang Haoze! Shi Mingwan stared at him for a long time. The box in her hand was really not light. She turned around and went to the kitchen, planning to chase him away later. After entering the kitchen, Shi Mingwan had always had the habit of tidying up things properly. She took out the fruits and vegetables inside and sorted them out. She hadn't eaten anything just now and planned to make herself a bowl of noodles. Knowing that Zhang Haoze wouldn't be able to chase him away for a while, Shi Mingwan decided to solve her own needs first. She would talk about it after she was full. She took out tomatoes and eggs and planned to cook tomato and egg noodles. The cabbage that was delivered today was also not bad. She washed it together. Shi Mingwan didn't like to eat whole leaves of vegetables when she cooked noodles. When she ate vegetables, she had to cut them into pieces. This was a very strange habit. Shi Mingwan cut the vegetables and processed the ingredients. Her culinary skills weren't bad. As the eldest daughter of the family, she had been studying and working outside for so many years. Her culinary skills were quite good. In less than 20 minutes, she had already taken the noodles out of the pot and scooped them up. The eggs on top were fried golden, and the tomatoes and vegetables matched well. They looked very appetizing. Shi Mingwan had forgotten that Zhang Haoze was still outside. Just as she was about to take the noodles to the dining table outside, she turned around and found Zhang Haoze standing at the kitchen door. He had been staring at her for an unknown period of time. She didn't know how long he had been there. Shi Mingwan's expression turned ugly again. She didn't want to pay attention to Zhang Haoze. In fact, seeing him in front of her always made her uncontrollably think of what happened back then. She thought of the year when she and her dear brother depended on each other. She picked up the noodles and passed Zhang Haoze to place them on the dining table. Shi Mingwan was about to sit down and eat the noodles. However, she realized that Zhang Haoze had also followed her out and sat at the dining table. Shi Mingwan, who was about to eat the noodles, stopped for a moment. She looked at Zhang Haoze and didn't know what was wrong with her. President Zhang, you haven't left. Do you want to eat noodles? Zhang Haoze glanced at her. Before she could react, he brought the bowl of noodles over and placed it in front of him, including the chopsticks in her hand. She was stunned for a moment and saw that Zhang Haoze was like a robber. He actually started to eat the noodles that she cooked just like that. Shi Mingwan wanted to say that she was just being polite. She didn't want to treat him to noodles at all. Okay? Didn't he know that this was just China-style politeness? Also, who gave him the right to come uninvited and sit in the living room of her house, eating the supper that she had prepared for herself? Zhang Haoze. Chapter 658. There was a faint aroma of food in the air. Shi Mingwan was wearing the clothes that Xiaoze had bought. She scooped up the food in the kitchen and carried it out. Xiaoze sat on the small table like a master. It was unknown where Xiaoze found this table. Previously, Shi Mingwan and Xiao Zhe were eating at the coffee table. This morning, she cooked porridge. When she brought it to the coffee table, she felt that it was very inconvenient to eat on the sofa. She had to bend over. "We should get a table," she said. "Wouldn't it be more comfortable to sit down and eat?" When she said that, Xiao Zhe moved the table over at noon. It was a square table that was commonly seen in the countryside. There were also 2 chairs that were brought along with him. Shi Mingwan didn't even know how Xiao Zhe appeared. She watched as Xiao Zhe picked up the bowl and ate in big mouthfuls. The youth was still growing, so his appetite was astonishing. She basically cooked according to the amount of food she used to eat with her parents when they were at home. But other than her share, the rest went into the youth's stomach. The young man ate so much, but he didn't seem fat at all. He has lost a lot of weight. He sure had a lot of energy. Just now, when the table had been moved in, he had moved it in alone. She had asked for help, but he had refused. After resting for 2 days, the wounds on his face had healed a lot. There was only a bruise at the corner of his mouth. He could already see the youth's true appearance. He had an extremely good-looking face with long and narrow eyes. Shi Mingwan's previous school, the town she lived in, and the people she met after coming to Lin City, none of them were as good-looking as Zhang Haoze. He didn't lose to those celebrities on TV at all. It was just that this image was a little bad. His hand was injured, so he didn't hold the bowl. He just held it weakly. They ate like this. His posture was inevitably a little ugly. If this happened at home and her grandmother saw this, she would definitely scold her. He said that they had no manners and did not even hold their bowls properly. The youth noticed that Shi Mingwan was staring at him. He stopped eating and stared at Shi Mingwan. "What are you looking at?" As soon as the young man opened his mouth, his pretty face was ruined. Her voice during the puberty period was really not pleasant to hear. Shi Mingwan was caught peeping at the youth, so she looked a little uncomfortable. No matter what, she was only 12 years old this year. Staring at a boy like this was really too unrestrained. "I just want to ask, where did you get that table?" The youth didn't say anything. He finished a rice in his bowl in a few bites. When he went to scoop the next bowl of rice, he glanced at Shi Mingwan. "What? Afraid my desk was stolen? What if they come looking for you?" She didn't. Without waiting for Shi Mingwan to explain, the youth snorted. "Don't worry, I didn't steal it. No one will come to catch you. Big brother." Shi Mingwan bit her lip. She was a little hurt by the youth's hostile and impatient attitude. "I was just curious. I picked it up," the young man answered casually. "If I were going to steal, I wouldn't steal such a crappy table. Indeed, it was a little rotten. Look at the corner of the table. The paint had peeled off." Shi Mingwan didn't ask any more and ate quietly. However, when she saw the youth put down the bowl, she had a new question. "Where did you get the money to buy groceries?" The one she bought yesterday and the one she bought today, if she only gave the youth a few dozen yuan, it would not be enough. One had to know that the young man had actually bought ribs and meat today. Not only that, the young man also gave some rice and flour to the family. She was really curious. The young man relaxed his body on the chair. After eating and drinking his fill, the unruly and sinister aura on his body faded a little. "Don't worry. I didn't steal or rob. I came above board." Shi Mingwan looked at him with a hint of confusion in her eyes. "I can't ask." "No." The young man was very arrogant. Shi Mingwan didn't ask anymore. She lowered her head and continued to eat, but she muttered softly. The young man heard that sentence. The young man knocked on the table. "What do you mean? Speak clearly." Shi Mingwan stopped talking, but the young man suddenly moved his face closer. The table was old and not big. The young man suddenly moved so close that Shi Mingwan almost let go of the bowl she was holding. "Let me tell you, I'll worry about the money. It's not your turn." After saying that, as if he was afraid that Shi Mingwan wouldn't listen to him, he pointed his index finger at her face. "Remember, got it? If you dare to pick up trash, I'll cripple you first." Shi Mingwan didn't say anything. She looked at the young man and asked her question for the first time. "Dear brother, where are your parents? Why are you living here alone?" Moreover, other than the simplest furniture, there wasn't a single photo in the house. There wasn't even a trace of adult life. "My parents are dead." The young man glanced at her and sneered. "What about you? Where are your parents?" Why did you come here alone? I heard you speak, and you sound a little different from the locals of Lin City. You're not from the city, are you? What about your parents? Why don't they care about you? Shi Mingwan bit her lip and thought of her grandmother, who valued boys over girls, and her mother, who had just given birth to a little sister but was despised by her grandmother. It's not that they don't care about me. It's that I ran away from home. You're quite bold. The young man stared at Shi Mingwan and clicked his tongue. With your looks, you dare to run away from home? Nothing happened to her. She was really lucky. She asked for it when she met the two hooligans that day. What's wrong with my looks? Shi Mingwan's mother was a beauty. Shi Mingwan really didn't think she was good-looking. The young man suddenly moved his face closer and stared straight at her. Shi Mingwan felt uncomfortable being stared at by him. What are you doing? Do you really not know, or are you pretending not to know? The young man moved so close that she could clearly see the fine hairs on his skin. After all, she was a little girl, so she felt embarrassed. Shi Mingwan stepped back a little. Forget it, I won't tease you anymore. She wasn't like herself, who grew up in the streets. She was very clear about these things. She was just a child. The young man felt bored, so he stood up and walked out. Where are you going? Let's go. Perhaps he felt that his tone was a little bad. The young man added in his duck-like voice, I'm going to earn money. Aren't you always worried that I don't have money? I'm going to earn it now. Who was worried that he didn't have money? Shi Mingwan wasn't worried at all. Your hand is still injured. What do you want to do? Shi Mingwan thought of the table he had moved back earlier. The doctor told you not to carry heavy things. Have you forgotten? Don't worry. This injury won't kill me. The young man said this and left. The young man left, but he didn't come back for a long time. When night fell, Shi Mingwan wasn't waiting for him anymore. It was just that she didn't feel safe at home alone. There was only one door in this bungalow. There wasn't even an extra security door outside. It wasn't like when she was in town, where her neighbors were all close to her. It didn't matter. She hadn't seen anyone living next door in the past few days. What she didn't know was that this place was very close to a development zone in Lin City. This was an old city area. Most of the locals weren't willing to live here anymore. They were all rented to foreign workers. The people who lived here all went to work during the day, and the workers all had their own things to do. After returning home, they would be tired for a day. Who would be happy to meddle in other people's business? This was also the reason why no one came to help Shi Mingwan when she was chased by two people last time. Shi Mingwan curled up on the small sofa and stared at the door. She didn't dare to sleep. She didn't know where Qiao Zhe had gone and why he wasn't back yet. She got up and looked at the time again. The old alarm clock was already pointing at 11:30. The weather didn't seem to be good today. She heard the sound of rain hitting the window. The voice came again and again, making her more and more anxious. After all, she was only 12 years old. She ran away from home alone to Lin City. That young man, even though she clearly wasn't familiar with him, even though the young man looked vicious. But he was here, at least it wouldn't be so empty. She turned around again, but she still couldn't sleep. The rain outside seemed to be getting heavier and heavier. She couldn't sleep anymore, so she simply got up and wrapped herself in a blanket. She curled up and sat on the sofa. It was at this moment that the door opened. She was startled by the sound of the door opening and almost jumped up. It was at this moment that the young man pushed the door open and entered. The young man's clothes were wet, and his hair was also wet. The soles of his shoes were stained with mud, and he looked a little disheveled. Seeing that Shi Mingwan was still awake, the young man was stunned. You're not asleep yet. Shi Mingwan was too embarrassed to say that she was timid. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to sleep. Where did you go? Why are you back so late? You're long-winded. The young man shook the water off his hair and went to his room. Shi Mingwan got up and followed behind him. Why are you all wet? In, the young man replied casually. He was about to take off the wet clothes on his body. Suddenly, he turned around and looked at Shi Mingwan. There should still be ingredients in the kitchen, right? Yes. Are you hungry? In, cook a bowl of noodles for me. The young man looked at Shi Mingwan. Cook more. I'm going to take a shower. His tone of command didn't arouse the slightest dissatisfaction or resistance from Shi Mingwan. He was back. There was one more person here, so she didn't have to be so afraid anymore. She turned around and went to the kitchen. Cooking couldn't be any easier for her. The moment she took out the noodles, she thought of the young man's overly thin body. After thinking for a moment, she took out an egg and the remaining tomatoes that the young man had bought earlier. She took 20 minutes to cook the tomato and egg noodles. She took it out and placed it on the small table outside. The young man had just taken a shower. As soon as he came out, he smelled the fragrance of the noodles. He glanced at Shi Mengwan. Without saying anything, he sat down and picked up the noodles to eat. When he picked up the chopsticks, he realized something and glanced at Shi Mengwan. "You're not eating? No need. Go ahead and eat." Shi Mengwan shook his head. She had already brushed her teeth. She was a bit of a neat freak. After brushing her teeth, she refused to eat again. When a youth heard this, he didn't care about her anymore. Shi Mengwan could go to sleep now. "I'm going to sleep. When you're done eating, put the bowl in the sink. I'll wash it tomorrow." Long-winded, the youngster replied without raising his head while eating the noodles. Shi Mengwan's expression didn't look good. How was she long-winded? She ignored the young man and went straight to the sofa to sleep. The moment she closed her eyes, she thought, "I don't seem to be that good at cooking, right? Why did the youth eat so happily every time?" He wondered what kind of life he had led in the past. She was curious about the young man, but at this time, she knew that she couldn't get anything out of him. After casually eating a few mouthfuls of noodles, Shi Mengwan wasn't in the mood to continue. She put away the bowls and tidied up the kitchen again. She was obviously extremely tired, but she didn't want to sleep at all. She simply mopped the kitchen and living room floors. After she was done being tired and busy, Shi Mengwan returned to her room. The moment she entered the door, she was shocked. The person she thought had left was actually sitting on the bed in her room. Shi Mengwan stood at the door, looked at Jean Hauser, and then looked in the direction of the door. You didn't leave?" She looked at Jean Hauser. He had already taken off his suit jacket and vest. He was only wearing a shirt inside. At this moment, 2 of the buttons on his shirt were undone, and his sleeves were casually rolled up to his elbows. The stray hair on his forehead hung down, and his leopard-like eyes were still sharp. Especially when he was still sitting on the bed, his slender legs casually folded together. Besides being handsome, he also looked a little lazy. The words she wanted to chase him away were stuck in her throat, and she couldn't say a word. She didn't know before, but now she realized that it wasn't just women who misled people. It was the same for men. It took her a few seconds to find her voice, and Shi Mengwan took a step back. Looking at the enlarged face in front of her, she couldn't find her voice for a long time. She pinched her fingernails into her palms and reminded herself that the person in front of her wasn't her dear brother. She couldn't be entangled with him anymore. "Mr. Jean, it's getting late. Please leave." Her order to leave made Jean Hauser stand up. The room was only that big, so he easily walked in front of her. Shi Mengwan thought that he was going to leave, so she took another step back twice. She signaled that he could leave. However, Jean Hauser suddenly placed a hand on the wall behind her. Shi Mengwan's back was pressed tightly against the wall, and she didn't dare to move. "What did you call me?" Jean Hauser slowly moved his face closer. His breath pointed at her face. Shi Mengwan felt uncomfortable. She didn't know what kind of madness he was going through. Since he didn't admit that he was her dear brother and had a fiancée, then she should keep a distance from him. "Mr. Jean, it's getting late. Please, woo-woo." Her lips were kissed by someone, and the man's minty scent assaulted her face. Behind her was the cold wall, and in front of her was his hot chest. In one day, she had experienced the same scene twice. She didn't understand what Jean Hauser was thinking. All of her consciousness was confused by this domineering kiss. She thought of the way Jean Hauser ate noodles and the way her dear brother ate noodles. She thought of the way Jean Hauser sat on her bed with his legs folded, and then she thought of the way her dear brother sat on the sofa in the small bungalow. The 2 faces of youth and maturity overlapped in front of her. She couldn't escape from Jean Hauser's kiss. She even forgot how she resisted Jean Hauser in the hotel. Or perhaps at that time, she had to worry about someone passing by, but now she didn't have to worry. The kiss slowly changed, and John House's hands began to move around her body. Perhaps it was because the temperature in the room wasn't low, but she actually felt that his hands were a little hot. Her consciousness became more and more blurry. The only remaining string of reason told her that this was wrong. She couldn't do this. However, when John House's hand reached in her clothes, that kind of reason completely collapsed. She was utterly defeated in front of him and retreated step by step. She didn't know when her body arrived on the bed. She didn't know when her clothes fell to the ground. She only remembered feeling John House's kiss, John House's touch, and the feeling John House gave her. Although it wasn't rough, it wasn't as urgent as last time. However, it couldn't be said to be very gentle. Although she tried her best to restrain herself, it still carried a barbaric, almost plundering attack. When she merged with him, her mind went blank, and the only thought left was dear brother. Dear brother, she whispered those 3 words softly, but it made John House's eyes become deeper and gloomier. He kissed her lips, but felt that it wasn't enough. He increased his strength and smashed her into pieces. Naturally, that voice couldn't come out anymore. Everything would come to an end. When everything returned to calm, Shi Mengwan's remaining rationality finally began to return. She suddenly realized what she had done. What did John House do? She turned to look at him. The person was lying on the bed, looking at the ceiling above his head. His breathing was a little heavy. There was only the sound of the 2 of them breathing in the room. Shi Mengwan turned her face away. Her body was tired, but her heart was even more tired. What were they doing? What did he take her for? She turned over and slowly curled up. She was very tired. She needed to sleep now. Her body was carried into someone's arms. She tried to struggle, but she didn't have the strength. Moreover, struggling at this time was actually very laughable. They had just done everything they could and couldn't do. Wasn't it too late to struggle now? Shi Mengwan felt that she was being unreasonable, but now she was really being unreasonable. Don't touch me. Don't come again. She had no strength left. Didn't he know his limits just now? John House didn't do anything to her. He just hugged her into his arms, and his arms were a little tight. John House, let go of me. Shi Mengwan's back was tightly pressed against his chest. The 2 of them were in an extremely intimate position at this moment. She didn't like such intimacy, or perhaps she wasn't used to it. I'm going to take a shower. Seeing that he had no intention of letting go of her, she had no choice but to pull his arm. I said, let go of me. I'm going to take a shower. John House didn't let go of her. Instead, he turned her body around. The resistance on her face was too obvious. It was so obvious that John House didn't understand what she was resisting. He kissed her lips again. Shi Mengwan really felt tired. She didn't understand how he did it, but she couldn't ask, because John House started again. Just when she wanted to regain her senses and draw a clear line between them, he started a new round of plundering. This time, she didn't even have a place to escape. Shi Mengwan couldn't sleep. She couldn't sleep. After 3 rounds of sex and entanglement with John House, she was the same as last time. She should have been extremely tired, but now she was full of energy. She looked at the ceiling above her head and didn't quite understand how things had turned out like this. Her gaze fell on John House's face. What was he thinking? Why could he have sex with her while being affectionate with his girlfriend? She had never seen them get along, but she felt that she didn't need to see it. Just based on the fact that Chun Fei had been holding John House's hand just now. She knew, in places that she didn't see, the 2 of them were definitely intimate. But why? Chapter 659. Shi Mengwan never knew that one day she would fall into such a situation. She had once fantasized that if one day she met her dear brother and she found him, what would happen to her? Ever since she separated from her dear brother at the age of 13, she had often thought about it. Sometimes his heart ached just thinking about it. When she couldn't find Big Brother, she felt lost and lost. But now that he had found the person, he felt even worse. She was upset that her dear brother had forgotten about her and that he was treating her with such an attitude now. However, she hated herself even more, for the sake of that little bit of hope from before. He had put himself in such an awkward situation. Her gaze fell on John House's face, only to find that he had opened his eyes. Seeing that she was staring at him, he reached out and pulled her waist into his arms. Their bodies were pressed together again. Mengwan wasn't used to this kind of intimacy. "Don't move." John House put his hand on her waist to prevent her from making a sound. "It seems that you don't want to sleep?" If that's the case, his hand slowly moved down from the back of her waist. Mengwan was shocked and quickly grabbed his hand. "Don't do anything rash." Even she herself felt that her words were not imposing at all. If he wanted to mess around, he would have done it long ago. Why would he care about this? She lowered her head and saw John House's chest. She turned her face away uncomfortably. "I'm sleepy. I want to sleep." She tried to turn her back on him, but he wouldn't give her the chance. He pulled her body into his arms again. He lowered his head and looked at the flash of resistance in her eyes. "Let's sleep like this." Mengwan became more and more uncomfortable. How could she fall asleep like this? "If you don't sleep, I'll continue." His hand rested on her waist again. John House threatened again. Mengwan seemed to be frightened and quickly closed her eyes. Her eyes were closed tightly, and her long and thick eyelashes were trembling slightly. John House's eyes darkened. The hand that wasn't on Mengwan's waist trembled slightly. He raised it as if he was about to touch her face, but then he put it down again. He closed his eyes and did not look at her again. Mengwan couldn't fall asleep. Her mind was in a mess. She was rarely a loss like this. John House's chest was burning, and his hands on his waist were firm and strong. She couldn't break free, but she was afraid that he would really do it again. She closed her eyes and forced herself not to look at him. She thought that she wouldn't be able to fall asleep, but she fell asleep again in a daze. The dream came without warning, and Mengwan saw her 12-year-old self again. She had been with Xiao Zhe for more than a month. After more than a month, she had more or less familiarized herself with her surroundings. Sometimes she would go out during the day to look around, but she would not go too far and would come back again. She found a very old bookstore at the end of the alley. Then she had something to do. Xiao Zhe's residence didn't have a TV or other electronic products. At that time, there were already cell phones. However, it was impossible for people like Xiao Zhe and her to afford cell phones and communication products. Mengwan had nothing to do, so she went to the bookstore to borrow books every day. There weren't many books in the bookstore, but she liked to go there. At least she could pass the time. However, Xiao Zhe went out every day. He seemed to be very busy, especially after the injury on his hand healed. He went out early and returned late every day. Sometimes he would come back for dinner, but after dinner, he would run out again. She asked him what he was doing, but he told her not to worry about it. After a long time, she didn't ask anymore. Like Xiao Zhe's sister, she cleaned up the house, cooked, and washed clothes for him every day. However, after she stayed at Xiao Zhe's place for more than a month, the weather in Lin City entered late autumn. Lin City was located in the south, and the weather was extreme. In such a season, the temperature difference was huge. It was fine during the day. She only wore long sleeves, so she didn't feel cold. But at night, a blanket really couldn't warm her up. She felt cold. When it turned cold on the first day, she could still endure it. The next day, there was an autumn rain. She was extremely cold. She curled up on the sofa and looked at Xiao Zhe's room with a conflicted expression. She had stayed at Xiao Zhe's place for more than a month, so she naturally knew that the young man's house only had a blanket and nothing else. She didn't know where the young man got the money from during this period of time, but he had enough to eat and buy clothes for her. But she wasn't sure if her dear brother would agree to buy a blanket. She was so cold that she felt uncomfortable. She tossed and turned on the sofa for a long time, but she couldn't fall asleep. "What are you doing?" Her movements were so loud that even Xiao Zhe, who was inside, was disturbed by her. He got up and looked at Mengwan, who was sleeping on the sofa. His face was full of unhappiness. Mengwan got up and wrapped herself tightly with the blanket. She looked at the young man timidly. "I'm cold." She was too embarrassed to continue. She originally wanted to take care of Xiao Zhe until his hand recovered and then go home. She thought about how she quarreled with her grandmother and how her family was like that. If she went back and her parents didn't change their mind and still wanted to send her sister away, she would rather not go back. But after staying for more than a month, although Xiao Zhe sometimes looked fierce, he treated her well. Xiao Zhe treated her well, but she was a little embarrassed. He saved her from being bullied. She stayed to repay him for saving her life. But now, she wanted him to raise her. Now, she even wanted him to buy her a blanket. A 12-year-old girl was very thin-skinned. If it wasn't for the fact that it was really cold, she would be too embarrassed to say anything. Xiao Zhe glanced at her, then looked at the sofa. Go sleep on the bed. What about you? Shi Mingwan bit her lip and looked at the sofa. He was much taller than her. How could he sleep on such a sofa? Xiao Zhe didn't say anything and gestured for her to get up. He pulled the blanket over and lay down on the sofa. When he really fell asleep, Shi Mingwan realized that Xiao Zhe really couldn't sleep. He was already 7 meters tall. He couldn't even put his feet down when he slept on the sofa. Not to mention that the small blanket couldn't cover him. Dear brother, go to sleep. Xiao Zhe closed his eyes as if he was going to sleep just like that. Shi Mingwan bit her lip. She didn't enter the room. She looked at Xiao Zhe and then at the bed. In the end, her hands clenched tightly into fists. Dear brother, why don't you sleep on the bed too? The weather was getting colder and colder. She couldn't let Xiao Zhe sleep on the sofa outside. If this continued, he would definitely catch a cold. When Xiao Zhe heard this, he opened his eyes and looked at her. You want to sleep with me? Shi Mingwan was a little embarrassed. In the end, she nodded. Dear brother, I believe in you. Xiao Zhe stared at her face and finally sat up. Shi Mingwan entered the room, and Xiao Zhe followed her in. He lay down on the bed. Shi Mingwan stood there, feeling a little awkward. After Xiao Zhe fell asleep, he pulled the blanket over himself and closed his eyes to sleep. After waiting for a while, he didn't see Shi Mingwan come up to sleep, so he opened his eyes again. He looked at Shi Mingwan and found that she was standing there motionlessly, a little at a loss for what to do. Aren't you sleepy? Sleepy. How could she not be sleepy? But no matter how sleepy she was still a girl. Just now, she was just impulsive. She was afraid that dear brother wouldn't sleep well and would catch a cold, so she asked him to sleep on the bed too. Now that she had calmed down, Shi Mingwan felt awkward. Then go to sleep. Xiao Zhe ran outside every day during the day, so he exercised a lot every day. Now, he was sleepy and wanted to sleep. Before he closed his eyes, he glanced at Shi Mingwan again. Don't worry, I'm not interested in your shriveled body. Shi Mingwan was still a little girl. When had she ever heard such words? Her face was burning fiercely. She was blushing and embarrassed. But what Xiao Zhe said was the truth. She was only 12 years old this year and hadn't developed yet. She was just a little girl. She got on the bed and slept an arm's length away from Xiao Zhe. She covered her body with the blanket. Covering herself with a blanket was completely different from covering herself with a blanket. She finally felt that she wasn't cold anymore. Because she wasn't cold anymore, her complexion was much better. With someone sleeping beside her, she thought that she wouldn't be able to sleep. But she was really sleepy. Slowly, she actually fell asleep. When Shi Mingwan woke up in the morning, she realized that she was sleeping with Xiao Zhe. The young man's sleeping posture was quite casual. One of his feet was already outside the blanket, and the other was still under the blanket. His slender arm was placed on her shoulder, just like that. Shi Mingwan looked at that hand, and then at the young man's sleeping face. She confirmed that the young man didn't mean it. She uncomfortably stepped back, wanting to avoid the young man's hand. But the bed was only so big, so where could she avoid it? She could only take the young man's hand away, but the young man opened his eyes at this moment. Her hand was still holding his hand, and she suddenly met the young man's dark and deep gaze. Shi Mingwan was shocked and quickly let go of her hand. Xiao Zhe's hand dropped again and hit her shoulder. She felt the pain, and her face instantly changed color. What are you doing? The young man stood up. His duck-like voice sounded a little hoarse in the morning, and it was even more unpleasant to hear. Nothing. Shi Mingwan quickly got up. I'm just asking you what you're eating for breakfast. Anything. There was no need to ask about such things. Shi Mengwan had always made her own decisions. Shi Mengwan hadn't lived with her parents since she was young. Because her parents had given birth to a girl, she wasn't close to her cousins at home. This was the first time she had slept in the same bed with a boy, and it was a boy she had not known for long. The young man only felt that she was strange. How could he have thought of her young girl's thoughts? Shi Mengwan had lived with the young man for a few days before she realized that in the young man's heart, there was no difference between men and women. Every day, he slept as he should and did as he should. He still took good care of Shi Mengwan. However, she slowly came to her senses. Perhaps in the young man's heart at that time, he only treated her as a little brother or a little sister. He was very busy. She didn't even know why he was so busy. What she could be sure of was that the young man was definitely not studying. She knew that other people's children should be in school at the age of 15. They were either in their first or second year of high school. However, the young man wasn't in school. She had asked a few times, but Xiaoze said he wasn't. She didn't ask anymore. Her relationship with the young man had always been like this. She treated the young man as a big brother, and the young man treated her as a little sister. If the young man hadn't bought the wrong bowl of glutinous rice balls that day and bought them home as glutinous rice balls, their relationship might have always been that of a big brother and a little sister, right? Shi Mengwan woke up from her sleep and realized that she had slept until noon again. She blinked her eyes and seemed to have spent some effort to realize where she was and what had happened. She looked at the other side of the bed, but it was already empty. Zhang Haoze had already left. She sat up and the blanket slid down. The marks on her body were no longer covered. Shi Mengwan pursed her lips into a straight line. She bit her lip and thought of Zhang Haoze's frivolous behavior last night and of her obedience without any resistance. She suddenly felt as if there was a thorn in her heart. She curled up her body and pulled up the blanket to cover herself. She looked at an unknown point, and her mood became gloomy bit by bit. Today was Su Qingsang's birthday. Su Qingsang's birthday was also very interesting. It was the day after Christmas. In the past, Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan would always be together. The two sisters would have a meal together on Su Qingsang's birthday. They would celebrate her birthday together. Su Qingsang was an illegitimate daughter. In the past, no one in the Su family would remember her birthday, and no one would specially celebrate her birthday. Every year, she would ask Su Qingsang to come to her apartment and cook a bowl of longevity noodles for her. This year was different. Su Qingsang was married. Shi Mengwan believed that Hu Jinyao would definitely be prepared. On Christmas Day, Shi Mengwan spent it with the employees of the studio. It was the end of the year. Although there were many things to do, she was not an unreasonable boss. She treated the employees to a meal and accompanied them to karaoke, which was very rare. After a night of fooling around, she remembered the next day that she had an appointment with 2 clients that day. Shi Mengwan had already ordered a cake, but the client was particularly difficult to deal with. After Shi Mengwan sent the client away, she went to take the cake and rushed to the place where Su Qingsang was celebrating her birthday. Only then did she realize that something was wrong. Su Qingsang had acknowledged her mother, and Xiang Kaiping was also there. But this time, not only Xiang Kaiping, but also Su Qinghui was there for her birthday. Shi Mengwan looked at Su Qingsang and then at Su Qinghui. The calmest person among them was Hu Jinyao, as if nothing had happened. Shi Mengwan looked at him for a few minutes and realized that Su Qinghui probably felt guilty towards Xiang Kaiping because Xiang Kaiping didn't like him. She looked at Su Qinghui and felt strange. She had to admit that a woman's intuition was quite accurate. In Shi Mengwan's heart, Su Qinghui was the representative of a scumbag. He had a wife, but also an old lover. Not only did he have an old lover, but he also had an illegitimate daughter. In the past, he had ignored this illegitimate daughter for so many years. When his old lover came back, he started to care about this illegitimate daughter again. No matter how she looked at it, it was strange. She felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't tell why. Seeing that Xiang Kaiping was unhappy, she used her usual talent and laughed in front of her. Finally, Xiang Kaiping had a smile on her face. After the party, Shi Mengwan was a little worried about Su Qingsang. However, When she saw the protective look on Hua Jinyao's face, she felt relieved again. A faint envy surged in her heart. No matter how difficult Su Qingsang had been in the past 20 years, at least she was happy now. After all, Hua Jinyao was really good to her. After saying goodbye to Su Qingsang, Shi Mingwan wasn't in a hurry to go home. It had been more than a week since the last time Zhang Haoze appeared and left. These days, she couldn't help but think of Zhang Haoze. Occasionally, she would ask herself in her heart, why couldn't she let him go? She kept convincing herself to forget Zhang Haoze, the man who came and went as he pleased, but she found that she couldn't do it. She stopped the car in front of the river embankment, got out, and walked along the river embankment. It was winter in Lin City, and the weather was very cold. There weren't many people on the river embankment. Shi Mingwan tightened her coat, walked to a bench, and sat down. Lin City had been developing well in the past few years. There were tall buildings on the other side of the river embankment, and the LED walls outside the buildings were playing all kinds of advertisements. The new year was coming, and the advertisements were very festive and red. However, Shi Mingwan didn't feel the atmosphere of the new year at all. She took out her phone and took a picture of the scenery on the other side of the river. She wanted to post it on WeChat, but in the end, she deleted it. This was the way of the world. Happy things could be shared, but loneliness couldn't be shared with anyone. She put away her phone and planned to go home, feeling a little cold from the cold wind. At that moment, another person sat down on the bench. Shi Mingwan was stunned for a moment. She turned her face, and the light from the river embankment shone on the person's face. She looked at Zhang Haoze and was stunned for a moment. She was looking at him, and he was looking at her. She couldn't help but look behind her again. There was no one else. It was just him. She didn't know when he came, and how long had he been here. Zhang. Before she could finish her sentence, Zhang Haoze reached out and hugged her tightly. Shi Mingwan's body froze there. She didn't know what to say. There seemed to be something wrong with Zhang Haoze today. His hands held her tightly in his arms. The night wind blew, and Shi Mingwan should feel cold. But now that she was hugged by him, she didn't feel cold. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. She didn't move, and he didn't move either, until she seemed to hear someone approaching and walking in this direction. She tried to retreat from Zhang Haoze's arms, but he hugged her very tightly. She was helpless. When someone approached, she buried her face in his chest. Inexplicably, she didn't want others to see her with Zhang Haoze. The footsteps approached. The person might have just passed by here at night, but he quickly left. She could hear the footsteps approaching, and they seemed to have stopped for a moment. She didn't know that the people who passed by were two girls. When they saw Zhang Haoze's appearance, even though they didn't see it clearly, they were still stunned by Zhang Haoze. One of the two girls even wanted to secretly take out her phone to take a picture of Zhang Haoze, but she was defeated by Zhang Haoze's gloomy gaze. As his footsteps left, Zhang Haoze's hand loosened a little. Shi Mingwan looked up from his arms and met his deep eyes. There were many emotions in those eyes. Shi Mingwan couldn't see them clearly for a moment. She wanted to see them clearly, but she found that Zhang Haoze's gaze made her sink into it. Their eyes met, and her eyes were filled with his shadow. Zhang Haoze narrowed his eyes slightly. He suddenly approached her, pressed a hand on the back of her head, and kissed her lips forcefully. His lips were cold, and so was hers. In this weather, the temperature of their bodies wouldn't be too high. However, after their slightly cold lips met, she began to feel hot. She blinked her eyes. Zhang Haoze's face in front of her made her a little intoxicated. She couldn't help but reach out her hand to hold his face, as if she wanted to see his face more clearly. There was a pair of hands on her eyes. Zhang Haoze covered her eyes and deepened a kiss. His embrace slowly warmed her. Shi Mingwan, who had felt lonely before, decided not to think about anything for a moment. Just like that, she was hugged and kissed by him. She couldn't see his face, and the feeling in the darkness was especially clear. His kiss was so domineering, and all her feelings were focused on that one spot. She even unconsciously responded to him, and that kind of response made him deepen the kiss. Shi Mingwan was stunned for a moment. She realized what she had done and went back to pull Zhang Haoze's hand. However, he let go of her at this moment and hugged her tightly instead. Her face was on his shoulder, so she couldn't see his expression. Her hands hung by her side. For a moment, she wanted to hug him back, but she forced herself to put them down. He suddenly got up, and before she could react, he brought her out of the river embankment. Ming could only follow his footsteps and reach the place where she parked her car. Only now did she know that John Hauser might have been following her just now. She didn't get into the car. Chapter 660. She didn't move, and neither did John Hauser. Ming gritted her teeth. The cold wind gave her a headache. In the end, she could only go around to the other side of the car and get in. She didn't speak. She turned her back to John Hauser and didn't look at him. She just looked at the scenery outside the car window. This was the direction of her home. After Ming saw it clearly, she couldn't help but call out, "Stop!" As soon as she asked him to stop, John Hauser really stopped. She turned to look at John Hauser, wanting him to get out of the car. However, before she could say anything, John Hauser actually got out of the car. This time, it was Ming's turn to be shocked. Was John Hauser so easy to talk to? She was a little suspicious and couldn't help but glance at John Hauser. Her gaze followed John Hauser outside the car. She found that John Hauser had gone to a convenience store nearby. Ming glanced in that direction, then wanted to sit in the driver's seat and drive away. However, she found that John Hauser had actually pulled out the key. She could only sit there without moving and look at John Hauser, not understanding what he was thinking. John Hauser soon came out, and he seemed to be carrying a bag in his hand. He got into the car, threw the bag on the back seat, and started the car again. Ming couldn't help but look back. Unfortunately, it was too dark in the car, so she couldn't see clearly. She looked at John Hauser's face again. John Hauser. She bit her lip and seemed to be organizing her words in her mind. "I admit that I treated you as someone else. She turned her face away, unable to continue. What did she say? She said that she did not treat him as someone else, that he was the person in her heart. From the age of 12 to the age of 25, for the past 13 years, she had been thinking about him every single day. But now, she had to force herself to tell him that she only thought of him as someone else. John Hauser glanced at her with a gloomy gaze, but he went back to driving seriously. It wasn't too far from her apartment, so it wouldn't take long for them to arrive. The car stopped, and Ming got out of the car. John Hauser got out of the car and took the bag from the back of the car seat. Ming reached out to take the key from John Hauser's hand, but he had already stepped into the car. It was only then that Ming saw clearly what was in the bag in his hand. Although only a corner was revealed, it was enough for her to see it clearly. Looking at the boxes of ultra-thin Okamoto, she blushed and quickly followed John Hauser. "You John Hauser." John Hauser walked quickly. He entered the apartment building in a few steps and pressed the button for the elevator. "John Hauser, can we talk?" Ming bit her lip. She still wanted to say something, but the elevator came down and someone came out. When he saw John Hauser and the other man, he took another look at them. The combination of a handsome man and a beautiful woman was always more eye-catching. Ming couldn't say anything else. She lowered her head and stood a step behind John Hauser. The man had left. John Hauser entered the elevator. Ming stood there without moving for a long time. Outside the elevator, John Hauser and she looked at each other. The last person to admit defeat was Ming. She stood in. She felt powerless. This feeling of helplessness made her not in the mood to speak until she entered the house. The moment she entered the door, she stood at the door and looked at John Hauser, who seemed to have entered an uninhabited land. "John Hauser, let's have a good talk?" "Okay." John Hauser casually placed the bag in his hand on the coffee table, then walked to her and stood in front of her. Ming closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was a hint of determination in her beautiful almond-shaped eyes. "I'm sorry, I said it just now. I treated you as someone else. Maybe my behavior wasn't appropriate and made you misunderstand. I apologize to you. I hope you understand that I'm not a prostitute, and I'm not a very casual woman." Ming didn't want to continue pestering him. She would rather lower her stance first. She didn't quite understand what Jean Hauser was thinking. No matter what, she felt that the way the two of them got along wasn't normal. Every time they met, they would have sex, and after sleeping, they would split their things. She thought that if she said this, he would understand. She looked up at Jean Hauser and found that he was standing still. Jean Hauser? Are you done? She didn't express herself clearly. What I mean is, Jean Hauser, this is my home, my place. I hope you can leave this place now. Jean Hauser looked at her face, which obviously wanted to chase him away, and took a step forward. Sherman Wan's back leaned against the door. She was 7 meters tall, but in front of Jean Hauser, who was 8 meters tall, she wasn't tall enough. She raised her head and looked at him. Jean Hauser, it's getting late. Please. A kiss landed on her lips. Sherman Wan quickly reacted after a momentary daze. She struggled with all her might, and her movements were more intense than before. Jean Hauser had no choice but to stop because of her interference. However, he didn't let go of her. Instead, he placed his hands on both sides of her body. Jean Hauser. Sherman Wan felt that she had already made her words very clear. I've already said it. I just treat you as someone else. Her lips were pressed against his again. He was grinding against her lips with a force that made her feel pain. Woo-woo. She looked at him with a cold gaze. He was also looking at her, not giving in at all. It was almost a stalemate. She felt pain and opened her mouth to bite him. He retreated and took her again. In the end, Sherman Wan was the first to lose. She was panting and her legs were weak. She almost couldn't stand. His big hand was on her waist. He wrapped her in his arms and didn't let her fall from his arms to the ground. Jean, after kissing for too long, her voice felt a little hoarse. She swallowed her saliva. Jean Hauser's hand caressed her captivating red lips. His slightly cold fingertips gently brushed past, causing Sherman Wan's body to tremble uncontrollably. You treat me as someone else? Jean Hauser moved closer to her, his hand still on her lips. He narrowed his eyes and stared at her face. Yes. Sherman Wan nodded. She looked away and didn't look at Jean Hauser's face. I treated you as someone else. Now I know that you're not, so let's just leave it at that. You want to end it? Jean Hauser's voice was low. Sherman Wan bit her lip and nodded again. She didn't speak, and Jean Hauser didn't speak either. The room was very quiet. The air conditioner wasn't turned on. Sherman Wan had been leaning against the door and felt a little cold. She subconsciously twisted her body. Her waist tightened, and Jean Hauser once again pulled her into his arms. He suddenly moved closer, and the distance between their faces was less than a centimeter. Treat me as someone else? He asked again. Yes. Sherman Wan gritted her teeth and turned to look at him with a firm gaze. She saw the corners of Jean Hauser's lips curl up slightly. His forehead pressed against hers. If that's the case, then why don't you continue being someone else? Sherman Wan was speechless. She didn't know what she could answer. The moment Jean Hauser was about to pick her up, she realized that something was wrong. No, don't. No way. What? Jean Hauser stopped for a moment, still staring at her face. Anyway, no way. Sherman Wan pressed her hands against his chest. Her mind couldn't think very fast at this moment. His aura, his embrace, and his kiss would make her unable to think. You have a fiancé. Yes, that was the reason. As if she had an idea, she suddenly raised her head and looked at Jean Hauser. You already have a fiancé. You can't do this. Jean Hauser's reaction was to pick her up forcefully and bring her into the room. Jean Hauser, I don't have a fiancé. Chun, he didn't give her a chance to ask. He kissed her lips. When he passed by the coffee table, he gently hooked his pinky finger and picked up the bag of condoms. Sherman Wan felt cold when she slept until midnight. She turned over and instinctively moved her body closer to the heat source. She felt like she was surrounded by someone. The warm chest made her no longer feel cold. She almost sighed as she pressed her face against the heat source. This pillow was really comfortable to hug. Sherman Wan rubbed her face against the pillow, but she felt that something was wrong. It was firm and warm, broad and strong. This wasn't the touch of a pillow. She suddenly opened her eyes. What she saw was a piece of wheat-colored skin. She could even see 2 thin scratches on it. She had left them yesterday. Realizing this, she instinctively took a step back. The hand on her back made it impossible for her to retreat. She looked up and saw Jean House's enlarged face in front of her. She panicked for some reason and started to pull his hand. She clearly wanted to make things clear with Jean House yesterday, but in the end, the two of them rolled together again. This wasn't what she wanted. Shi Mingwan felt a headache coming on. Jean House's hand was taken away by her, but in the next second, it landed on her shoulder. Her body was pressed back, and her body was suppressed by someone. The man had woken up at some point. He was lying on top of her and staring at her face with a burning gaze. "Let go of me." Seeing that he didn't let go of her, Shi Mingwan looked up at him. "Jean House, why aren't you leaving? Do you think I'm that kind of casual woman?" Seeing that Jean House's brows furrowed, she reached out to push him again. "Jean House, don't you mind if I think you're another man? I already answered this question yesterday." As Jean House spoke, he lowered his head and bit her shoulder. The force wasn't strong, but it made her feel a little pain. "You!" Shi Mingwan was furious and spoke without thinking. "What kind of woman do you want? Let's not talk about others. Chen Fei is your girlfriend, right? Aren't you afraid that she'll be unhappy if you know what you're doing to me here?" Jean House stopped for a moment. There was a flash of darkness in his eyes. "Don't mention her. What happened between them had nothing to do with Chen Fei. I don't want to mention her either." Shi Mingwan's emotions were complicated. "But the problem is, she's your girlfriend, isn't she?" Jean House's face moved closer to her. "Do you mind?" "I mind." Shi Mingwan looked at his face and didn't want to say that she minded very much. "But this isn't because I have deep feelings for you, but because I don't want to be a mistress. No woman would like to be a mistress, and she was no exception." Jean House stared at her face for a long time and finally said, "She has heart disease." This could be considered an explanation. After saying that, he lowered his head and kissed her shoulder again. Shi Mingwan, however, heard a different answer at this time. So that was how it was. Chen Fei had heart disease. Perhaps she couldn't exercise vigorously. What about Jean House? The two of them had done it so many times, so she could understand that his desire was very strong. Her health wasn't bad, but she begged for mercy under him every time. If Chen Fei had heart disease, how could she bear it? Her heart felt as if it had been cut by him with a knife, and it hurt dully. She was lying to him when she said that she treated him as someone else. But he really treated her as a prostitute. She was just a substitute that Jean House found because he pitted Chen Fei. She was a woman who helped him solve his desire. Her heart hurt. It was so painful that even her body's senses became dull. The man didn't notice her absent-mindedness and pain. It was like a sword that split her apart. Then, he pulled it into pieces. She was broken into pieces. From body to heart, she would never be complete again. Time passed by a few more days, and it was New Year's Day. Shi Mingwan's studio also had 3 days off. She originally wanted to go and play with Su Qingsang, but Su Qingsang went to Japan with Xiang Kaiping. Before going, she asked Shi Mingwan if she wanted to go with her. Shi Mingwan knew that this was a trip that Su Qingsang wanted to improve her relationship with Xiang Kaiping. So how could she be so blind? She drove herself back to her home. Compared to the 5 or 6 hours it took to return home 13 years ago, the distance of the repaired highway was shortened by nearly half. It only took Shi Mingwan more than 2 hours to drive home. Shi Mingwan's mother was very happy to see her. As usual, Shi Mingwan bought a lot of things and gave her parents a lot of supplements, as well as some specialties that could only be bought in Lin City. She usually sent them a lot, but it was different to bring them back herself. This time, Shi Mingwan really wanted to stay for 2 more days to celebrate New Year's Day with her family. Although such a new year was not popular in a small place, her parents were very happy to see her. They slaughtered chickens and fish, and her sister, Shi Mingru, was also very happy. They kept surrounding her and calling her sister, asking her to stay for 2 more days. Shi Mingwan agreed, but the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. She had only stayed for a day when she received a call from a client. The other party asked her to rush an urgent letter. That was an old client who had established a good working relationship with Sun Gu since the establishment of the studio. After Shi Mingwan helplessly explained to her parents, she returned to Lin City again under her mother's disappointed gaze. This time, she didn't alarm the other employees. She went straight back to the studio to meet the client. She wrote down all the other parties' requests. Because it was an urgent letter, Shi Mingwan returned to her office and began to prepare to draw. Before she started, she scrolled through her WeChat moments. She saw the pictures Su Qingsing posted, the hot springs in Japan, and the wooden plaques for prayer in Sensoji Temple. She casually clicked like. When she saw the cherry blossom patterns, Shi Mingwan was inspired. When she drew, she always didn't care. Time passed by for a few hours, but she didn't notice. Her phone vibrated a few times, but she didn't notice. The sun was setting, and the lights were on in the room. Shi Mingwan didn't notice that the neon lights were already shining outside. She spent a few hours to make the first draft interesting. Then, she decided on the fabric and the materials needed for the accessories. It was all done. She was stunned for a moment. When she saw Jean House's familiar face, she suddenly exploded. You. She said a few words consecutively. Her feet were so numb that she couldn't stand up. The aftereffects of fear made her body weak. She gritted her teeth, raised her hand, and punched Jean House's shoulder. Be asterisk starred. You be asterisk starred. Do you know that you scare me to death? You're too much of a be asterisk starred. You be asterisk starred. She didn't know many curse words, so she repeated the word be asterisk starred over and over again. She relaxed, and her feet went limp. She was about to slide down again. Jean House quickly picked her up. He placed her on the chair in front of the desk. What's wrong with you? Shi Mingwan couldn't say anything. She just felt terrified. Just now, she really thought that a bad person had come. She lowered her head, and her eyes were a little red. No matter how strong she wasn't a woman. Her heart was beating very fast and anxiously. It took her a few minutes to calm her heart down. She looked up at John House and swallowed her saliva. She finally calmed down a little. What are you doing here? If he hadn't suddenly appeared just now, she wouldn't have been so scared. The last time he woke up on her bed, he pressed down on her again, and when she went into the bathroom to take care of herself, he left as quietly as before. She wouldn't be as disappointed as she was the first time. She understood one thing. In John House's heart, she was Chun Fei-Fei's substitute. She was just taking on his expectations for Chun Fei-Fei. Was it sad? Was it sad? Was it sad? She felt bad. But no matter how sad or uncomfortable she felt, she was the one who asked for it. She was the one who gave him a chance. But if she did it again, she would probably still make the same choice. She missed her dear brother too much. Even if there was only a sliver of a chance, she would try her best to get close to her dear brother. She looked at Jean House, but she couldn't control her tone. There was a hint of rebuke in it. Jean House looked at her pale face. Are you okay? She didn't seem to be well. I'm fine. Shi Mingwan was no longer afraid. But her expression didn't recover so quickly. You haven't told me yet. Why are you here? I called you, but you didn't answer. He called her? When did that happen? Shi Mingwan's phone was placed on the desk. She reached out and picked it up. There were indeed a few missed calls. However, they were all unfamiliar numbers. She couldn't help but look up at Jean House. Is this your phone number? Yes. Jean House nodded, took her phone, and saved his number. Shi Mingwan looked at his actions and entered his full name. Jean House. It was an extremely unfamiliar title that showed their current relationship. She didn't stop him, but in her heart, she decided to block his number later. Why are you looking for me? I went to your house, but you weren't there. This sentence could be considered an explanation. Shi Mingwan watched him put down his phone. She was sitting, and he was standing. In comparison, he was much taller than her. The pressure was very strong, and she didn't like it. Why did you go to my house again? She tried her best not to sound so resentful. If you want a woman, you can go find a prostitute. No, with your conditions, as long as you wave your hand, there should be many women for you to choose. Isn't that so? Although she didn't understand how Xiao Zhe had become the current Jean House, she also didn't understand how the dear brother, who had nothing back then, had become an elite in the business world. But even without these external blessings, just Jean House's face alone could attract many women, right? Why did he insist on clinging to her? Jean House narrowed his eyes and frowned because of her words. Chapter 661. Jean House was only relying on her love for him. No matter how spineless she was and how much she loved him, she couldn't stand him treating her like this. Sure Ming-wan. Jean House's voice was a little low. If one looked carefully, they would find that his expression wasn't very good. Sure Ming-wan noticed that this seemed to be the first time he called her by her name, and he called her by her full name. Feeling a little sad, she blinked her eyes and suppressed the feeling of wanting to cry. Jean House, don't tell me you want to say that you don't think of me as a prostitute? Then what are you doing now? Don't tell me you want to say that you like me? Did he think she would believe him? Jean House didn't like to hear that word from her mouth, but she insisted on saying it twice in a row. After she finished questioning him, Jean House lowered his head to kiss her. This time, Shi Mingwan made up her mind not to let him have his way. She retreated and used the force to push him away. Jean House's hands were placed on her shoulders. She pushed him away, and his body retreated a little. Jean House, you can leave. Her feet had already recovered from the numbness. Now, she stood up and tried her best not to lose her aura, even if she had already lost completely. Jean House didn't say anything. He just bent down to look at her again and placed his hands on both sides of the armrest of her chair. The scene in front of her was really ambiguous. Shi Mingwan pressed her body tightly against the back and stared at Jean House warily. She didn't say anything, and he didn't say anything either. He just stared at her. Shi Mingwan was very uncomfortable. She blinked her eyes and was still thinking about how to chase this person away. With a bang, the sudden sound from outside stunned Shi Mingwan for a moment. She turned around and realized that someone was setting off fireworks outside. It was only then that she remembered. Today was New Year's Day. New Year's Day. Although fireworks were prohibited, there were still some people who didn't take these rules seriously. Bang! The fireworks rose into the sky once again. It was extremely bright. When Shi Mingwan rented this place, half of the reason was because the view was good and there were a few department stores opposite it. This place happened to be at a crossroads. Someone was setting off fireworks in the middle of the intersection. The moment the fireworks lit up, it successfully broke the stalemate between the two of them. Shi Mingwan didn't look for too long. When she realized that Jean House seemed to be in a daze, she knew that the opportunity had come. Shi Mingwan quickly got up the moment Jean House turned his head. She walked around to the back of the desk. Her feet were still a little numb, so she chose to ignore it. She picked up her purse and car keys and prepared to leave. Her footsteps were a little fast. At this moment, she couldn't care about anything else and quickly headed outside. When her hand touched the door, he didn't follow her. When she went downstairs and walked to the door, he didn't seem to follow her either. She walked out of the company's door and stopped. No matter what, the door had to be locked. As soon as she turned around, she saw that Jean House had followed her. Startled, she instinctively took a step back. Seeing that he had come out, she closed the door and went to the elevator. The corridor was very quiet except for the footsteps of the two people. There was no other way. The stairs are around the corner, next to the elevator. Shi Mingwan stood by the elevator, pressed the button, and waited for the elevator to arrive. When she entered the elevator, Shi Mingwan hesitated for a moment, but it was only for a moment. She went in, stood at the position of the button, and pressed the button for the first floor. Jean House followed her in. He didn't speak, and she didn't speak either. She didn't want to look at him, but the wall of the elevator was a mirror. She didn't need to turn around to see the man's figure. Jean House's figure was really good. The black windbreaker made him look imposing, but he had a handsomeness that wasn't inferior to that of a model. He had an inverted triangle figure, tall and strong, and a pair of long and slender legs. Further up, she retracted her gaze and didn't look at Jean House's gaze. She felt that after what happened just now, he should have given up. That was good. It wasn't until she got into the car that Shi Mingwan felt that she was thinking too well. She sat in the driver's seat and looked at Jean House in the passenger seat. Jean House, please get out of the car. Jean House sat still. Shi Mingwan gritted her teeth. Zhan Haoze, I'll say it again. I'm not a casual woman. The anger on her face was too obvious. Zhan Haoze glanced at her, and his voice was very soft. I'm not either. I'm not a prostitute, and I don't want to be Chun Feifei's substitute. Her voice couldn't help but rise a notch with suppressed anger. When Zhan Haoze heard Chun Feifei's name, a trace of disgust inevitably flashed across his face. That emotion came and went quickly, so Shi Mingwan didn't see it clearly. She thought that he didn't hear it, so she didn't mind saying it again. Zhan Haoze, I'll say it again. I'm not a prostitute, and I'm not a casual woman. What about before? Zhan Haoze suddenly approached her and stared at her face. Shi Mingwan's lips opened and closed and opened again. Under his sharp gaze, she was the first to admit defeat. I've said it before, I treat you as someone else. Any man wouldn't be able to stand her words and would leave, right? Then continue. Zhan Haoze said this. Shi Mingwan blinked and took some time to understand what he meant. I refuse. Zhan Haoze didn't say anything. Instead, he closed his eyes and relaxed his body, as if he wanted to sleep. Zhan Haoze, Shi Mingwan called out, and realized that Zhan Haoze didn't want to open his eyes at all. She became more and more annoyed. After a stalemate for nearly 3 minutes, when there was another burst of fireworks outside, she finally couldn't help but start the car. Forget it. On the first day of a new year, she told herself that she just didn't want to have a conflict with Zhan Haoze on such a day. The car stopped outside her apartment. She turned around and was about to call Zhan Haoze. She realized that he seemed to have really fallen asleep. Shi Mingwan was about to speak, but she saw the darkness in Zhan Haoze's eyes. She didn't notice it before, but now she saw that Zhan Haoze's expression didn't look very good. There were faint green marks under his eyes, and there were also some green marks on his chin. It looked like he really didn't have a good rest. Shi Mingwan didn't speak. Through the sleeping face in front of her, she seemed to see the 15-year-old Xiao Zhe again. That was also New Year's Day, their first New Year together. She left home. Although she missed it, she was still a child. If there were other things to distract her, she wouldn't have the time to miss home. It was the same on New Year's Day that year. The pollution between them wasn't as serious as it was now, and Lin City didn't ban the setting off of fireworks. Not only was it not banned, but there was also a fireworks party in a newly built park in Lin City on New Year's Day. Why did she know? It was also because the people living nearby were on holiday at that time. She heard people talk about it. She was only 12 years old, and she also wanted to see it. When she was eating with her dear brother, she told him about it. Of course, she just wanted to go. She didn't really have to go. The park was very far from the bungalow they lived in. Not only did they have to transfer 2 buses, it would take at least an hour to get there. It was too much trouble. Most importantly, at that time, there weren't as many subway lines as there were now. There were only 2 subway lines. It was already very late after the fireworks party ended. If they wanted to come back, there would be no bus, so they could only take a taxi back. Their financial situation at that time didn't allow them to go to the fireworks party at all. She could only say it casually. The youth didn't pay attention to her at that time, but on the next day, which was New Year's Day, he took her out in the afternoon. Dear brother, where are we going? After spending a few months together, Shi Mingwan became more and more comfortable calling the youth dear brother. Guess. I can't guess. Shi Mingwan shook her head. Today was the first day of the new year. She looked at the street and saw that there were really a lot of people. The bus was a little crowded. She almost fell when she made 2 turns. Be careful, hold me. The youth's voice had improved a little over the past few months, but it was still a little hoarse and unpleasant to hear. She looked at him. He was taller than her, and his hand was holding the ring on top. She pursed her lips and directly held his hand. When the bus made another turn, her body fell to the side again. The youth supported her with his hand that wasn't holding the ring. Although he was thin and small, he was quite strong. She was in his arms, half surrounded and protected. No matter how the people behind her shook and squeezed, she didn't fall anymore. At that time, she looked up at him and felt extremely at ease. If it weren't for her dear brother, she might have gone home long ago. But because of him, she always felt at ease. She lowered her head and smiled happily. What are you smiling at? Nothing. Ming shook her head. When they arrived at their destination, she realized that they had come to the park where the fireworks party was held. You have a ticket? As far as she knew, because there was a fireworks party on that day, tickets were needed for the park that was usually open today. No. More than 10 years ago, the cheapest ticket cost more than 100 yuan, and the ones inside were even more expensive. The youth held her hand. Follow me. You can see it without a ticket. What did he mean? Ming had been following the youth and only found out later. Near the park, there was a building that had just started to be built. One of the buildings had already been completed, but it hadn't been accepted yet. The young man was very bold. In the dim light of the night, he brought her to the roof. The night wind was very strong and cold. They could see the park opposite from where they were sitting. It'll start in a while. When a youth went out, he carried a bag. At that time, she didn't understand why the youth carried a bag. Only now did she understand. The youth took out a pair of binoculars and gave them to her. Use this to look. Thank you. Ming smiled. With the binoculars, she could see some of the performances in the park very clearly. It was very loud, and they could hear it from here. She was very happy, especially today. There was a group that she used to like very much. She couldn't help but turn around and point it out to the youth. However, she realized that the youth wasn't watching the performance in the park, but was looking at her. Dear brother, was there something dirty on her face? It's nothing. You can watch if you like. The youth turned his face away. The night was too dark, so she didn't see it. The youth's ears were also slightly red. She just held the binoculars and watched with great interest. The youth not only prepared the binoculars, but also snacks and water. They were all things that little girls would like. When the fireworks party started, the binoculars weren't even needed. Because she was very close, she could see very clearly. There were all kinds of fireworks, colorful and dazzling. She had never seen so many forms of fireworks. She was very excited, but she couldn't help but feel a chill. The young man looked at her, and just like when they were on the bus, he pulled her into his arms. He was clearly so thin, but his arms were so warm. She didn't feel cold. Instead, she became more and more interested. The scene that night was like an extremely brilliant dream that she would never forget for the rest of her life. After the fireworks party ended, there were no buses. The youth actually took a taxi and took her back. At that time, she wanted to ask him where the money came from. But the youth didn't say, so she didn't ask. When the car stopped outside the alley, she was a little sleepy and wanted to sleep. She had always lived a very regular life. When it was time, she would go to sleep. The youth didn't wake her up. Instead, he carried her on his back and carried her home just like that. Her thoughts came back to her senses from the drowsiness that day. Ming realized that Zhang Haoze had woken up at some point in time. She retracted her gaze, bit her lip, and quickly got out of the car. This time, when Zhang Haoze followed behind her, she didn't let him leave again. She knew that it was useless. When she entered the bathroom to take a shower, Ming looked at herself in the mirror and felt a little conflicted. She bit her lip. Why couldn't she make up her mind to solve something that she knew was wrong? Forget it. Today was the first day of the new year. If there was anything else, she could talk about it after today. Ming told herself that after today, she would definitely chase Zhang Haoze away, even though she knew that she couldn't do anything to Zhang Haoze. To Ming's surprise, when she returned to her room after taking a shower, Zhang Haoze was already lying on the bed. His eyes were closed, and he seemed to have fallen asleep again. Was he very sleepy? Ming wanted to ask, but she felt that she couldn't get anything out of him. She went to bed and fell asleep. Just as she turned off the light, Zhang Haoze reached out his hand. Her body stiffened for a moment. She didn't like this. She didn't like that every time Zhang Haoze came, he wanted to have sex with her. She didn't like that he only had passion in bed and coldness outside of bed. To her surprise, Zhang Haoze only hugged her. Sensing that her body was stiff, he buried his face in the pit of her neck and gently rubbed her neck. I'm very sleepy. I want to sleep. He lowered his voice and didn't say another word. The man seemed to be really sleepy and wanted to sleep. Ming waited for a while and heard the man's long breathing. She froze for a moment and couldn't help but look up at the man's face. The lights in the room were already off, and the curtains were drawn. She couldn't see clearly. It was dark. She thought about the dark shadow on the man's face just now, and the fatigue on the man's face. A flash of heartache flashed across her heart, but she tried her best to restrain it. She told herself that it had nothing to do with her. But no matter how much mental preparation she made, Ming still raised her hand. Just as she was about to touch the man's face, she retracted it. She closed her eyes and pressed her face against his heart when he was unconscious. Listening to his steady heartbeat, she fell asleep. When Ming woke up in the morning, Jean Hauser was still sleeping. He seemed to have really fallen asleep. She stared at his sleeping face for a long time, then gently retreated from his arms. After washing up, Ming realized that Jean Hauser was still asleep. She ignored him and went straight to the kitchen. After searching for the ingredients, Ming decided to make the simplest breakfast. She took one set of ingredients, but when she thought of the person who was sleeping in the room, she still took 2 more sets of ingredients. She remembered that he had always had a big appetite. In the room, Jean Hauser didn't sleep for long. He was woken up by the ringing of his phone. He picked up the phone. It was Chun Fei. "Brother Hao, when are you coming back?" "Fei?" Jean Hauser looked at the time and sat up. "Brother Hao." Chun Fei, who was on the other end of the phone, seemed to hear something different. "What's wrong with your voice? Are you sleeping?" "No." Jean Hauser shook his head, and his voice returned to its usual calmness. "What's the matter?" "Of course there's something. It's New Year's Day." "It's New Year's Day, but you're actually going on a business trip. You're not coming back to accompany me." There was silence. Jean Hauser didn't answer, and Chun Fei didn't really want him to. "That is too much. Why did he let you go on a business trip so far away by yourself? You still have to go for so many days. Are the people raised by the company all useless?" "Fei." Jean Hauser's voice changed. Chun Fei gritted her teeth. "Okay, I know this is because Dad trusts you, but I'm just not happy. I want you to accompany me. Wait for me to come back." Jean Hauser's voice was indifferent. "Is there anything else?" "Yes." Chun Fei thought of the news she had received before. "I heard that the marketing manager of the partner company is very beautiful. Do you think she's beautiful or me?" Jean Hauser didn't want to answer this question at all. "That's all you want to ask? Then I'll hang up. I still have a meeting later." "Brother Hao." Chun Fei gritted her teeth with a ferocious expression. Jean Hauser wasn't in front of her, and she wasn't afraid of being seen by him. Jean Hauser hung up the phone and went back to sleep. His phone rang again. He looked at the number and picked it up. "How is it? Is it convenient over there? Everything is going well." Tang Hua's voice sounded on the other end of the phone. "The things you asked for have been resolved." "Yes." Jean Hauser knew that it would definitely be resolved. "Speaking of which, why are you in such a hurry to return to Lin City?" Tang Hua realized that he didn't quite understand this boss recently. "You compressed the business that would take a week to finish to 3 days and rushed back to Lin City today. Why? You're not going to accompany the little princess of the Chun family, are you?" Jean Hauser rubbed the space between his eyebrows and didn't answer Tang Hua's question. "Finish everything and strike while the iron is hot. Take over the territory in H City as well." When it came to business, Tang Hua's attitude was much more serious. "Okay, it's just that it's the new year, and they're making a lot of moves here. It's better to make more moves. It's best to muddy the waters. When the time comes, it'll be easier for us to do things." "Yes." Tang Hua nodded and thought of something else. "All right, Six Brother has been clamoring to go to Lin City to help you. What do you think about this? Don't let him come." Jean Hauser thought of something. "Let him go to Qing City." "Boss." The way he addressed him didn't change Jean Hauser's decision. "Not only Sixth Brother, but also Fourth Brother and Seventh Brother. Just say that I said it." "Yes." "Tell Fourth Brother that I'm ready to pull in the net." "Okay." Tang Hua's voice was a little excited. Jean Hauser hung up the phone, but he was no longer sleepy. When he was about to get up, he realized that Ming was standing at the door of the room and looking at him. The space between his brows twitched slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. Ming bit her lip and looked away from Jean Hauser's firm chest. She turned around and left quickly. If it wasn't for Zhang Hao's good hearing, he wouldn't have heard Shi Mengwan say the word eat. The dining room was very quiet. Shi Mengwan's house wasn't big. The dining room and the living room were connected. She sat at one end of the dining table, and Zhang Hao sat opposite her. She placed 2 sandwiches in front of him and a glass of milk in front of him. She ate the sandwich in front of her and didn't look at Zhang Hao. How similar was the atmosphere in front of her to 13 years ago? The scene was similar, but the people were different. Shi Mengwan suddenly lost her appetite. She casually took a few bites and finished the sandwich. She got up and didn't go back to her room. Without looking at Zhang Hao, she went straight to the living room and turned on the TV. She rarely watched TV. At this moment, the TV was replaying the New Year's Eve party the day before yesterday. She didn't know when it started, but some satellite TV stations competed to hold the New Year's Eve party every year. She didn't change the channel. She just stared at the TV in a daze until a very sexy female voice came from the phone. She sang with a very textured voice. There are so many scenes, so many romantic, so many people's hearts are sad, and they get together and part on good terms. I can't finish watching it for many days. You liked it when I kissed you just now, right? Otherwise, why did you keep holding my hand and not let go? You said you really wanted to take me back to your hometown. Slowly like you, slowly get intimate, slowly talk about yourself, slowly walk with you, slowly want to cooperate with you, slowly give me to you. Shi Mengwan couldn't help but start to daydream again. Those scenes were actually really not romantic, but she really wanted to slowly walk with Zhang Hao and slowly give herself to him. She turned her face in the direction of the dining table and found that Zhang Hao had finished eating at some point. He got up and walked to the sofa. She was looking at him, and he was also looking at her. He also saw the television. Perhaps Shi Mengwan's gaze was too direct. Zhang Hao walked to her side and sat down. He pulled her body into his arms, lowered his head, and kissed her lips directly and accurately. Shi Mengwan blinked and didn't refuse. Zhang Hao pressed her body onto the sofa. Shi Mengwan bore his weight and raised her hand to wrap around his neck. The sofa wasn't small, but it was a little difficult to accommodate 2 adults. In order not to fall, she hugged him tightly, and he hugged her body tightly. The air conditioner in the living room wasn't turned on, so Shi Mengwan was actually a little cold. However, it was only cold for a moment, and it quickly warmed up. When her clothes were torn apart and her body was hit by him, Shi Mengwan's heart flashed with bitterness. At this moment, she suddenly realized something. Zhang Hao wasn't the only one who liked to do this. In fact, she liked it too, because only at this moment, only when he was one with her, would she have the real feeling that he was her dear brother. Chapter 662. Shi Mengwan's body curled up there. She didn't speak, nor did she look at Zhang Hao. It was one thing to admit it in his heart, but it was another to show it and say it out loud. She felt ashamed. In fact, every time she had intimate relations with Zhang Hao, she felt ashamed. This was something that could not be controlled. The greater the satisfaction when they were together, the greater the emptiness after. Her body was carried into Zhang Hao's arms, but she suddenly waved his hand away. "Don't touch me." Zhang Hao's hand stopped in midair. Looking at her back, he didn't seem to understand what was wrong with her. Shi Mengwan didn't look at him. She quickly got up, hurriedly picked up the outermost clothes to cover her body, and then went into the bathroom. She locked the door and stayed inside for nearly half an hour. When he came out again, he had already tidied himself up. She returned to the living room and found that Zhang Hao was still sitting on the sofa. "You're still not leaving? Shouldn't he have left at this time in the past?" Zhang Hao sat on the sofa and looked at her. She had just taken a shower, and her skin was red. Her face looked tender, like a lotus flower that had just come out of the water. Zhang Hao didn't leave. He even reached out to her. Shi Mengwan looked at the outstretched hand for a long time. Instead of going over, she went to her small study. She didn't want to see Zhang Hao, so she could only let herself draw. Yesterday, she had saved her sketches in the mailbox. Now, all she had to do was open it and finish the rest. She had an idea in her mind to make a collection out of yesterday's dress. The entire series is themed around cherry blossoms. She was a person who immersed herself in her work and did not care about anything else. It was only when she heard a knock on the door that she thought she had misheard. She looked up and found John Hauser standing at the door. He was really free today. Sure, Mengwan was a little puzzled. Why didn't he leave after finishing it like before? Time to eat, he said. Sure, Mengwan was stunned for a moment. She blinked her eyes, as if she only had the time now to pay attention to the time. It was almost 1 o'clock. Eat? His cooking? Sure, Mengwan looked at John Hauser and remembered that he didn't know how to cook. She was a little curious and couldn't care less that she didn't want to see him just now. He got up and went outside. There were 4 dishes and 1 soup on the dining table. From the looks of it, one could tell that it was made by a chef. She was so engrossed in drawing that she didn't hear the door open. John Hauser sat down at the dining table. Sure, Mengwan glanced at him and sat down as well. The meal was eaten in silence. Sure, Mengwan glanced at John Hauser as she scooped the rice. It was a familiar movement and a familiar face. She withdrew her gaze and forced herself not to look at him again. After dinner, Sure Mengwan noticed a detail. John Hauser wasn't wearing the same clothes as yesterday. This discovery made her wonder if the clothes John Hauser left here last time looked like this. How could she not remember? She thought about the takeout that had just arrived. Someone had come when she was in the study drawing. They sent Chinese food and John Hauser's clothes over. She couldn't help but look at John Hauser. If she remembered correctly, he had left more than 1 set of clothes here. What was he trying to do? Come often? Or what? Once this thought came to her mind, Sure Mengwan couldn't sit still anymore. She didn't go back to the study to draw a draft. Instead, she sat down on the sofa and looked at John Hauser. She wanted to have a good talk with him. She had just sat down when John Hauser came over. He sat next to her and wrapped his big hands around her waist. Her body stiffened for a moment, but it was only for a moment. Soon, she was completely hugged by him. Her back was very tense. She tried her best to keep a certain distance from him, but it was almost impossible under such circumstances. His chin rested in the crook of her neck, and he held her tightly against him. John Hauser, the atmosphere in front of her wasn't right. She was afraid that he would act recklessly again when he got excited. In order to divert her attention, she picked up the remote control and turned on the TV. It happened to be a variety show. Sure Mengwan wasn't very interested in these things, but she forced herself to focus on the TV. It was a very popular show in recent years. A few guests were trying their best to amuse people. Sure Mengwan wasn't amused, but she watched very seriously. At first, she was afraid that John Hauser would do it again, but later, she realized that he didn't do anything else. She calmed down. John Hauser, yes, are you okay? He should be very busy, right? Didn't he have to go to work? Although she didn't know what he was doing now, she remembered that the last time they met, he knew Su Qing-sang and even called her Mrs. Hua. He was also there at Hua Jinyao's company's banquet. He had the demeanor of a business elite. Didn't he have to go to work? John Hauser frowned slightly when she saw how she couldn't wait for him to leave. The hand on her waist tightened. I'm free today. Didn't she say that she wasn't leaving? She resisted the urge to chase him away. Are you that free? There was a hint of sarcasm in her words. John Hauser heard it, but he wasn't angry. I'm not free, but he was free today. He compressed his work into 3 days to complete it, so he could be free today and tomorrow. Sure Mengwan was speechless. She thought to herself that she wanted to chase him away, but now she didn't know how to respond. While she was in a dilemma, he gently moved her face slightly. Her body pressed closer to him. Her overly intimate behavior made her turn her face to look at the TV and focus all her attention on it. What plans do you have today? Plans? What plans could she have? It turned out that she wanted to go home to accompany her parents and family. But because of the sudden order, she returned to Lin City. She turned to look at John Hauser, and he was also looking at her. John Hauser's eyes flashed with uneasiness when she looked at him with a puzzled gaze, but it was only for a moment. Aren't you going out? Today was the last day of the long holiday. Sure Mengwan bit her lip and turned to look at John Hauser. Her waist was still sore, which made her lack the mood to go out. I don't want to go out. The atmosphere was a little awkward. She turned to look at him. She had many questions to ask, such as what had happened to him. For example, why did he forget everything in the past? Or for example, why did he come? What was he thinking? Where did he think she was? But in the end, those questions turned into silence. She turned her face away and forced herself to focus on the TV again. She sat in his arms, and the two of them snuggled together. Their posture was very intimate. Sherman Wan's face was pressed against his chest. She couldn't tell what she was feeling. She couldn't help but sneak glances at him. His jawline was perfect, and his gaze was on the TV in front of him. Sensing her gaze, he turned his face to look at her. Sherman Wan quickly retracted her gaze like a thief. Her heart was beating a little fast, but before she could turn her face away, Jean House's hand was already on her cheek. He stared at her face, tilted his head, and kissed her lips just like that. The kiss was fiery hot, with his nice mint smell. Sherman Wan didn't even know how to breathe after kissing, but now she could already respond to him. She knew his actions and what he was going to do next. His lips weren't as cold as his person. Instead, they were very soft and warm. Her eyes gradually became a little blurry. It wasn't until she felt Jean House's hand slowly slide down from her waist, as if he was going to go further, that she grabbed his hand. She took a step back, stared at his face, and swallowed her saliva. No, don't do this kind of thing every time. Don't come here every time as if he was treating her as a target to vent. She couldn't stand this. Jean House looked at her with a deep gaze, with emotions that she couldn't understand. In the end, he didn't continue. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her waist again and started watching TV again. Sherman Wan didn't pay attention to what was on TV at all. She didn't expect Jean House to actually stop. This made her feel a little strange. She didn't sleep much yesterday, and she woke up quite early today. She was dizzy and slowly closed her eyes again. Sherman Wan remembered that after eating the wine-brewed meatballs on the Lantern Festival, Chowze left early and returned late for a few days. They slept on the same bed, but they couldn't see each other. She didn't understand what was wrong, but she felt that he might think she was being frivolous. After all, she came from a small town. Her parents had always been strict, and she knew that she might have done something wrong. When she thought of this, she almost couldn't control herself. It was as if she wanted to prove something, but it was also as if she wanted to get an answer. She woke up early and stopped the young man when he was about to go out. "Dear brother, why have you ignored me these few days?" She looked at the young man's handsome features, her little face full of confusion. Chowze didn't dare to look at Sherman Wan's eyes. He was 15 years old, and there were usually some people by his side. He had also seen a lot of things. He knew what he meant that night, but he was too ashamed to say it out loud. He had feelings for this girl who was still a young girl. In his eyes, this was shameful and couldn't be said. He didn't even dare to face Sherman Wan. She called him brother and treated him as her brother. She came and suffered with him. She cooked for him and washed his clothes. She took care of his daily life. This small house, because of Sherman Wan, unexpectedly felt like a home. He felt very guilty. The young man's thoughts were secretive and couldn't be told. She wasn't even 14 years old. At this moment, when he met Sherman Wan's clear eyes, he looked away. "I'm not ignoring you. You're thinking too much." The young man's voice was about to go through puberty. It was still a little hoarse, but it was a little clearer. Sherman Wan bit her lip and shook her head. "No, it's not like that. You're just avoiding me. You're ignoring me." "It's nothing," the young man replied in a muffled voice and turned to leave. Sherman Wan quickly blocked in front of him. Her eyes unexpectedly revealed a maturity that didn't belong to her age. "Where are you going?" "I'm not going anywhere." "Where are you going if you're not going?" "I'm going too. I'm going to earn money." "I'm going too. I can help you." "I don't want your help." "Why?" Sherman Wan decided to get to the bottom of it. "Why can't I go? I eat and use your food every day, and I can also work hard to support myself. I want to help." "I told you I don't want your help." Could she go where he was going? A hint of anxiety appeared on the young man's face. "Make way. I'm leaving." His tone was a little anxious, but it wasn't fierce. Sherman Wan's face darkened as she took a step forward. "I just want to help you. I said it's not suitable for you. Do you hate me? Shi Mingwan felt a rare sense of loss and hurt in her heart. Tell me honestly, do you hate me? What nonsense are you talking about? If he could hate her, he wouldn't be so unable to face her. You still say no? You wouldn't have spoken to me in such a tone in the past, and you wouldn't have treated me like this. Other than the first month she came, she got along with Xiao Zhe like brother and sister. She thought that in his heart, even if he couldn't treat her as his biological sister, he would at least take good care of her. She had a special status. Shi Mingwan's unreasonable pestering made the young man a little angry. Without thinking, he walked past her and was about to leave. Shi Mingwan gritted her teeth and blocked him with determination. Tell me, do you dislike me? She was embarrassed to say that sentence, but now she had to say it. You dislike me, don't you? Because you think I'm frivolous, you think I'm casual, and I think I'm the kind of girl who doesn't have self-respect? Isn't that right? What nonsense are you talking about? That's what you think. Shi Mingwan bit her lip and was immersed in great sadness. If that's not the case, why are you ignoring me? Is it because I kissed you that day? It was fine if she didn't mention that day, but when she mentioned that day, the young man's face instantly turned red. Half of it was because he was embarrassed, and the other half was because he was anxious. If you dislike me, I'll leave now. Shi Mingwan didn't see the young man's awkwardness. She turned around and was about to open the door. Her body was hugged by the young man. His skinny and muscular arms circled her waist tightly. Stop fooling around. The young man's rare fierce tone shocked Shi Mingwan. She turned around. The young man looked at her and said in an unfriendly tone, I really don't dislike you, and I don't think you're frivolous. If she was frivolous, then what about him who kissed her first? What about him? He thought about her entering his dreams, and even his dreams were filled with shameful scenes. What about him? Meeting the girl's clear eyes, he couldn't say a single word. He didn't want the girl to think that he was dirty and dirty. I've just been too busy recently. I promise you, I'll come back earlier in the future. Then, can you not go today? No. He promised Six Brother that he would take the lead today. Not today. How about tomorrow? I won't go anywhere tomorrow. I'll stay at home with you. You said that. I said it. I promise. Afraid that the girl wouldn't believe him, the young man almost raised 3 fingers to swear. Shi Mingwan was satisfied, and a smile appeared on her face. Then you go. I'll wait for you at home. The young man glanced at her, nodded, and turned to leave. At night, the young man lay on the same bed as the girl again. In fact, ever since he discovered his secret thoughts, the young man wanted nothing more than to stay far away from the girl. But he couldn't. There was no heating in Lin City in winter, and there was no air conditioning in the house. It was especially cold at night. If he slept on the sofa, he would definitely catch a cold. He carefully slept on the side of the bed, wanting to avoid the girl's approach. However, the ubiquitous chill that night made the girl instinctively lean towards him. That action made Shi Mingwan freeze again. She didn't dare to move at all. Do you want to go out for dinner? She had slept for almost the entire afternoon, and it was almost 5 o'clock now. Go out for dinner? Yes. Zhang Haoze moved his feet without leaving a trace. Shi Mingwan had slept on his lap for too long, and his feet were a little numb. Shi Mingwan was thinking about his suggestion when she saw his movements from the corner of her eye. She immediately understood. She might have been too tired to sleep for so long. Didn't he know that she should just leave him on the sofa like this? You don't want to go out? Go. Shi Mingwan answered casually. After she finished answering, she realized what she had agreed to. Then let's go change? She was still wearing the same housecoat from yesterday. It was too late for Shi Mingwan to go back on her word. She glanced at Zhang Haoze and hurried into the room. In less than 10 minutes, Shi Mingwan changed her clothes and came out. Zhang Haoze was already standing at the door, holding his trench coat in his hand. She glanced down at his feet. Her face was a little hot. Was she too confident in Zhang Haoze? She actually fell asleep on his lap? She lowered her head and reached for the car key, but Zhang Haoze took it. Let's go. The two of them went downstairs together. Shi Mingwan stood half an arm away from Zhang Haoze. After leaving the door, The cold wind blew, and Shi Mingwan was completely awake. Now, she was a little regretful. She shouldn't have come out. If she had known earlier, she would have ordered takeout. What do you want to eat? John Hauser asked her. She shook her head. Anything. After saying that, she realized that this answer seemed to be one of the most annoying answers. According to the internet, it was the most annoying to ask someone what they wanted to eat. She explained a little embarrassedly, I'm not picky. During that year when they were together, what hadn't they suffered? What hadn't they suffered? John Hauser glanced at her and didn't say anything. The two of them got into the car. He sat in the driver's seat. Anything? Shi Mingwan looked up at the signboard in front of her. The two big words on it made her a little dumbfounded. John Hauser didn't look at her and let her inside. The signboard on the door was anything. They entered the door. It was a small courtyard. After passing through the courtyard, there were a few private rooms. Someone came over and led the two of them to one of them. They entered the door. The waiter served tea. Shi Mingwan took a sip. It was Long Jing. She didn't know much about tea, but she used to have a client who was in the tea business. She kind of understood. After the tea was served, she didn't see anyone. No one brought the menu over. She looked at John Hauser in surprise. Don't you need to order? No. John Hauser's voice was very soft. This shop is called Anything, which means that they don't allow people to order. Their chef will serve the dishes according to the number of people who come. There was such a shop in Lin City? Shi Mingwan really didn't know. The private room wasn't big and was decorated very elegantly. There were only the two of them, but it was too quiet. Shi Mingwan bit her lip and tried to find something to say. How did you know about this place? I found it by accident. John Hauser lowered his head and drank his tea. He didn't say how he found it by accident. Shi Mingwan didn't ask anymore. When she came in just now, she saw the small courtyard outside and felt that it was very interesting. Now, she wanted to go out and take a look. Can I go out and take a look? Sure. John Hauser looked at the curiosity on her face. Do you want me to accompany you? No need, I'll just take a look. In this season, she seemed to have seen a plum blossom in the courtyard outside. It wasn't the flowering season yet, but she seemed to have seen the bud. She wanted to confirm it. John Hauser watched her stand up and didn't follow her. He only added softly, the owner of this shop is very nice. You can look around. Chapter 663. The moment Shi Mingwan saw that person, she wanted to step back, but it was too late. She didn't expect to meet Xiao Yanba here. She felt guilty for a moment and wanted to step back, but Xiao Yanba had already seen her. She was close to Su Qingsang and had met Xiao Yanba a few times. She nodded at him and walked past him to continue walking outside. She wasn't close to Xiao Yanba, so she wasn't worried that he would tell Su Qingsang. It didn't matter even if they met. However, after taking 2 steps, she saw that there were other people following behind Xiao Yanba. They were none other than Su Chenghui and Hua Jinyao. Hello, uncle. She didn't have to greet Xiao Yanba, but she had to greet Su Chenghui. Hua Jinyao. Hello. She had a good relationship with Su Qingsang and was familiar with Hua Jinyao, so she called him by his name. Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded. He was the one who was most familiar with Shi Mingwan among the 3 of them. Are you alone? I'm having dinner with a client. Hua Jinyao finally saw Shi Mingwan. What about you? Same as you. Shi Mingwan smiled. I was wondering why you didn't accompany Qingsang to Japan. Yeah. He really wanted to go to Japan with Su Qingsang. The reasons why he didn't go were that he had to discuss a collaboration project recently. The other reason was that, like Shi Mingwan, you wanted to give Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping a chance to be alone. She glanced at Su Chenghui, who acted as if he hadn't heard her. Go on with your work. I'm just looking around. Shi Mingwan tried her best to smile like usual. Hua Jinyao wouldn't pay attention to women other than Su Qingsang, so he didn't think too much into it. After saying goodbye to Shi Mingwan, the 3 of them went to the private room in the opposite direction. While Shi Mingwan was relieved, she also felt a little worried. Lin City was only so big, but she followed John Hauser out to eat like this. John Hauser and Hua Jinyao's company seemed to be working together. If they met, she didn't even dare to think about it. He was no longer in the mood to appreciate the scenery outside. Shi Mingwan returned to the private room. Zhang Haoze seemed to be on the phone. When he saw her come in, he said to the other end of the phone and hung up. Are you done? No. Shi Mingwan walked to the seat opposite him and sat down. She glanced at him, picked up the tea in front of her, and took a sip. The tea was already cold. Zhang Haoze looked at her and raised his hand to refill the teacup in front of her. Shi Mingwan held the cup. The warm teacup made her slightly relieved, but she was still a little worried. She didn't seem to be in the right mood. She was still in high spirits when she went out, but now her attitude had suddenly changed. Zhang Haoze looked at her, but didn't say anything. He picked up the teacup in front of him and drank some tea. After a moment of silence, Shi Mingwan bit her lip, put down her teacup, and looked at Zhang Haoze. What happened? I'm fine. Shi Mingwan still wanted to say something, but the waiter had already started to serve the dishes. The soup was cooled down and warmed up 3 times. The portion was not much. However, the dishes looked good and exquisite. Shi Mingwan was a foodie. Although the dishes in front of her were local dishes in Lin City, they were very appetizing. She picked up her chopsticks and temporarily forgot about her encounter with Hu Jinyao. After dinner, when Zhang Haoze got up and was about to leave, he found that Shi Mingwan was sitting there without moving. Zhang Haoze stopped and stood at the door to look at her, as if he didn't understand what she was thinking. Zhang Haoze, wait a moment. She got up and walked in front of him, not letting him open the door. I met Hu Jinyao just now. Hu Jinyao? What's he doing here? Zhang Haoze thought for a moment and immediately thought of it. Li Junsheng came to Lin City. He and Hu Jinyao grew up together, so he took good care of Hu Jinyao. Recently, there was a big project. Hu Jinyao might have wanted to help his father-in-law's family, so he got the Li Corporation to cooperate. Is there a back door here? Back door? Yes. Shi Mingwan nodded. I think, if possible, we'd better not meet them, right? What do you mean? Zhang Haoze's face instantly changed. I can't be seen? Isn't that so? Shi Mingwan didn't back down like before. She looked up at him. She cleared her throat with a bitterness that she didn't even notice. All right, it's not that you can't be seen, it's that I can't be seen. She lowered her head to look at him, her gaze calm. You have a fiancé. Tell me, how can I appear in front of others with you? Especially since that person was Hu Jinyao, Su Qingsang's husband. If he saw her with Zhang Haoze, he would definitely tell Su Qingsang. I said, I don't have a fiancé. Then what about Miss Chun? Shi Mingwan didn't want to be aggressive, nor did she want to question him, nor did she want to give people such a feeling. But she couldn't help it. She's not your fiancé. Then who is she? Your girlfriend? Zhang Haoze's expression was very ugly now. His lips were pursed into a straight line. Anyone who knew him would know that this was a sign that he was about to lose his temper. However, Shi Mingwan didn't know him. What she knew was the big brother in her dreams, not the Zhang Haoze in front of her, who had been separated from her for more than 10 years and had forgotten everything about the past. Shi Mingwan, I'll say it again. She's not my girlfriend. She's not my fiancée either. Oh. Shi Mingwan gave a faint oh. It was obvious that she didn't believe him. Zhang Haoze looked at her face and suddenly pulled her into his arms. He lowered his head and kissed her lips. She had just drunk the Longjing tea, and there was still the fragrance of the tea in her mouth. There was also a hint of bitterness in the fragrance. Shi Mingwan didn't move. She just stared at him with her eyes wide open. Her eyes were clear and straightforward. There were clear emotions in them. She wouldn't resist. She would let him do whatever he wanted. But she didn't believe him, nor did she believe his words. That was it. Zhang Haoze seemed to be annoyed and increased the strength on his lips. She was in pain, but she refused to give in. She didn't want to go out with him like this. It wouldn't be good if they met Hu Jinyao. Zhang Haoze knew what she was thinking. He bit her lips. It wasn't hard, but it hurt. She was really in pain, but she looked straight at him. She didn't give him a response, nor did she step back. She didn't even respond. He suddenly let go of her and took a step back. Her breathing was a little heavy, and so was he. He looked at her deeply, then suddenly reached out, opened the door, and walked out. The door had been silenced, so it didn't make too much noise when it was opened and closed. She watched the door close. She couldn't hear any footsteps outside. She didn't move and just stood there. Her heart couldn't resist Jean Hauser, and her body couldn't resist Jean Hauser either. But her rationality, her dignity, and everything else told her that she still had a bottom line. That was the bottom line that she wouldn't allow Jean Hauser to cross. She knew it clearly, but her legs still felt weak. She stood there and found that her heart was beating very fast. She didn't know how long had passed. It was probably 10 minutes or maybe 20 minutes. She finally came back to her senses and left the private room. There was no one in the corridor. This shop was also interesting. There didn't seem to be many waiters, and there weren't many people either. How casual. Huh. She didn't meet with Jean Yao and the others again. She went out and got into her car. She didn't see Jean Hauser, but she didn't care. She got into the car, started the car, and left quickly. When she got home, she couldn't fall asleep after sleeping for the whole afternoon. She went into the study and drew out all her previous ideas. When the hour hand pointed to 12 o'clock, she finally finished drawing all her ideas. Before she got up and went to bed, she looked in the direction of the living room. There was no one, and there was no sound. That night, she didn't hear any more knocks on the door. That man, he should have left. When she returned to her room, she realized that the bed sheets and quilts had been changed. Some of the traces inside had also been cleaned up. She hadn't noticed it before, but when she went to the balcony outside, she unexpectedly saw the bed sheets there. Shi Mengwan bit her lip and stared at the bed sheets for a long time. Finally, she returned to her bed to sleep. The bed sheets and quilts that she had put away earlier were all dried. There was a faint smell of laundry detergent. The only thing that wasn't there was the mint smell of that man. She pulled up the blanket to cover her head, but in the end, she felt stuffy and had no choice but to get out again. Sleep. It would be best if he didn't come. She told herself. Jean Hauser really didn't come again. Time passed by more than half a month later. In the past half a month, Su Qing-seng came back, and she went to Su Qing-sang's house a few times. With Xiang Kaiping there, her mood was much better. Xiang Kaiping was a magical person. She had a kind of reassuring power. She liked to spend time with Xiang Kaiping. There was no burden or purpose. She was like a kind elder. She just didn't expect that such an elder would have an accident. She only found out later that Xiang Kaiping had been in a car accident. The cause of the accident was Su Peijian. She didn't like that woman before. Although Su Peijian didn't cause any real harm to Su Qing-seng, she had always looked down on Su Qing-seng, and her attitude was quite arrogant. If she really didn't like Su Qing-seng, she could have asked Su Changhui to kick Su Qing-seng out or break off their relationship. But she didn't have that ability, and she wouldn't do such a thing. But she always liked to make things difficult for Su Qing-seng. These were not the main point. The main point was that Xiang Kaiping was injured, and it was her lumbar spine that was almost paralyzed. She went to the hospital to accompany Xiang Kaiping for 2 days in a row. Because she was worried about Xiang Kaiping's injury, she didn't have the mood to care about where Jean Hauser went or what he was doing during the time he disappeared. Until a few days before the new year. Shi Mengwan had originally planned to wait until the spring festival before returning home. However, her younger sister, Shi Mengru, called and said that there was trouble at home again. She hurriedly handed over the matters of Xiao Qiu's studio and rushed home. This wasn't the first time they had caused a ruckus. Mom didn't give birth to a son, so Grandma always said that this family was incomplete. In the past, he always wanted his mother to have a third child. Later, when the doctor told her that her mother had hurt her body when giving birth to Shi Mengru and that it would be difficult for her to get pregnant, Grandma gave up. In addition, Shi Mengwan's disappearance made Shi Mengwan's father give up on the idea of having another son. However, it was useless for Shi Mengwan's father to dismiss it. Shi Mengwan's grandmother refused. She had never given up and wanted Shi Mengwan's father to have another child. Later, he saw that he could not persuade him. She brought up the old matter again and asked Shi Mengwan's father to adopt Shi Mengwan's uncle's son. Shi Mengwan's 2 uncles both had 2 sons, so one of them could be adopted. However, Shi Mengwan didn't agree. Her home, the home she believed in, was only her younger sister, and her parents. She didn't want a 5th person. Moreover, her uncle's cousins weren't young anymore. The youngest was already in his teens. After being raised to this age, he couldn't be brought along. In addition, she didn't like the attitude of her two uncles and aunts who thought that having a son was amazing. She had always opposed this matter. Her attitude was too domineering, and her parents couldn't do anything about it. Naturally, they would listen to her on this matter. However, Grandma would come to the house every few days to cause trouble. She wouldn't give up until she achieved her goal. Her youngest uncle's youngest son was 11 years old this year. He also wanted to adopt his eldest uncle's family so that he could live a better life. When Shi Mengwan returned home, she was anxious to explain this matter. Other than Xiao Qiu, no one knew that she had returned to her hometown. Grandma was already 81 years old. She was an old lady from the countryside and was in good health. When Shi Mengwan returned home, she heard her grandmother scolding her mother. Shi Mengwan's mother's surname was Chun. Back then, she was also a famous beauty in the surrounding villages. Even though she was old, her charm was still there. Shi Mengwan's mother was at the door, listening to her mother-in-law scold her for being a hen that couldn't lay eggs. She had heard this for more than 10 years and was already immune to it. However, Shi Mengwan couldn't take it anymore. She hurriedly got out of the car and rushed into the courtyard. Seeing the neighbors attracted by her grandmother's loud voice, she was furious. "Grandma, if my mother is a hen that can't lay eggs, then what are we? You little girl, you still know how to come back?" When Grandma Shi saw her, she became even angrier. "You're quite impressive. You know how to run off to enjoy life and leave this family to your parents. What? Did I say something wrong? Do you want to say that you're right?" After what happened back then, Shi Mengwan wasn't afraid of anyone. She was even more fearless. "My mother gave birth to me and my sister, so why can't she lay eggs? If my family didn't have my mother, would we be living such a good life now? I just don't understand. Grandma, you're already so old. Why can't you calm down and enjoy your old age? Why do you have to get involved in the affairs of the younger generation? You little heartless one. How can you speak to your elders like that?" Huh? Grandma Shi was angry, but Shi Mengwan wasn't afraid of her. If you want to be filial and respectful to your elders, you have to be worthy of being filial and respectful to your elders. All these years, how has my mother treated Grandma? Doesn't Grandma know? Is it fun for you to force my mother like this every day? How am I forcing your mother? I'm doing it for her own good. Let me tell you, I'm finding someone to send her off. She'll thank me in the future. Yes, thank you. Thank you for letting her raise someone else's son, right? That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.